Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Sirius retied his boots as everyone rested for the day. The sun was beginning to sink into the horizon and darkness was beginning to set in. Sirius was sick of the riding and wished he could get away with just walking to wherever they were going. Every time he would dismount, Sirius would slide off his horse slowly and rest on a rock. He had to ease onto the hard surface carefully. How he wished he had a pillow to sit on. "How are you faring, Master Black?" asked Gimli, coming over to build and light the man's campfire. This man had nearly burnt his hands twice, and almost the entire camp once. It was best for someone else to make his fires. "It hurts when I sit down," said Sirius, easing off the rock and down into the soft grass. "I suppose you'll have that, having never ridden before," said Gimli as he built the fire. Legolas brought him over a few rabbits to cook on the fire. "I remember Harry had some trouble riding Will-O-Wisp. He fell off a number of times." Sirius smiled. "Aragorn would leap of his horse every time and help him back on," said Gimli with a laugh. Sirius's smile fell off his face and was replaced with a frown. He looked around and saw Aragorn was over speaking to King Theoden, and then headed into the king's tent. "Where's the Grand Leader going?" asked Sirius. "Do you mean Aragorn?" asked Legolas with a smile. "He is talking to the visitor." "What visitor?" asked Sirius suspiciously. "We do not know," said Legolas, turning the rabbits over in the fire. "I'm thinking you and Aragorn don't get along," said Gimli. Legolas and he knew for a fact that they didn't get along, but they still wanted to find out why. "He just annoys me," said Sirius. "It's like Snivelus all over again, but now he looks sort of like me. What does he think of me?" he asked, looking over to the elf and dwarf. Gimli and Legolas exchanged looks and smiled over to Sirius. "He is quite fond of taunting you," said Legolas, sitting down. "All the similarities between us is getting to be a bit much," said Sirius, shaking his head. Then another question came to mind. "So, how long have you known my Harry?" Gimli leaned back on his rock and smiled. "We've known him since we were at Rivendell, the start of our quest." "From what I saw in my world, it wasn't a boring quest," said Sirius. "Pardon?" asked Legolas, looking confused. "I don't understand it myself, but apparently Harry's in two places at once. He's sleeping back home, and every time he sustains an injury here, it affects him at home," said Sirius. Legolas and Gimli stared. "Dorimi's beard. The boy is in two places at once?" asked Gimli. "Yeah, and I've been going insane. He kept getting injured, but nothing in our world was hurting him. Anything that was hurting him here was hurting him back home," said Sirius. "So, what dangerous stuff did he get into?" Legolas looked at the man with sympathy in his eyes. "Are you sure you want to hear?" "I think I can handle it," said Sirius, rubbing a hand down his tired face. But after an hour he could hardly sit still, and was becoming more and more agitated. "Why would he do that? Why would he go into danger like that?" wailed Sirius as he sobbed into his hands. "What's going on?" asked Aragorn, coming over, a new sheath and sword on his hip. "We've been telling him what has transpired with young Harry," said Gimli quietly. "I think it became too much for him to listen to," said Legolas, with as much sympathy as he could muster, without trying to convey to his dwarf friend how sensitive he himself could be. Aragorn looked at Sirius as he wept. There was no taunting glint in his eye. "I can understand his dismay," he said softly. Gimli looked up at the man with a smirk. "You all done provoking him, then?" "Not at all. I just don't kick a man when he is down," said Strider with a smile. He walked behind Sirius and patted him on the back. If it's any consolation, he always got back on his feet within a day. "He shouldn't have to. He's just a baby. He should have been kept safe," said Sirius through his hands. "Oh, we tried," said Aragorn, looking up into the sky. "We tried to keep him in Rivendell, we tried to hide him in Lothlorien, and then keep him out of the Battle of Helm's Deep. He wouldn't stay behind." "Why does that not surprise me?" said Sirius, pulling his hands down slightly. "I swear if anything dangerous were to happen, he'd be right there in the thick of it. When Dumbledore told me about his years at school, I earned half of the gray hair on my head." The Fellowship smiled fondly at the ground. "So, what you said days ago, is Harry really in danger?" asked Aragorn. "Yeah, and apparently he's in more danger than he was before," said Sirius. "I just want to take him home where he'll be safe." "From what he says about his world, it's no more dangerous than this world," said Strider, poking the fire with a stick. Sirius watched the fire crackle. "I suppose, but I just want him home." They sat in silence. "I don't think we could honestly say he would rather stay here. He speaks of going home so often," said Gimli. Really? Asked Sirius. He tried to sound excited, but he was still worrying too much. He even passed up the love of a young woman, said Aragorn with a smile. Sirius raised his head slowly. Wait, what? Asked Sirius in shock. That's right, said Sirius. He had a... Really? Said Sirius with a smile playing on his face. In Helm's Deep, he had a numerous amount of young ladies attempting to win his affection, said Legolas. Sirius smiled broadly as he watched the fire. That's my boy. What's she like? Aragorn thought quietly. It had been so long, and he had only seen her briefly, very few times. She was very lovely. I don't quite remember. It had been so long, but I'm sure Harry was fond of her. Oh boy, said Sirius, scratching his head. What's wrong? Asked Aragorn. From what Ron and Hermione told me of Harry's past, there might be a few girls back home that might not like more competition, said Sirius. The men sat in silence until all three of them began to laugh. Remus took over Sirius's spot while watching Harry in the dark room of Grimmauld Place. He flipped through the pages of his book on magical history that he had found in the Black family library. He wanted to know more about this crown that had appeared mysteriously in the house and the king of the magical realm. He would have read the book downstairs, but Hagrid was now uncomfortable about being inside the room alone. He felt that someone had come in and tried to hurt Harry, but Sirius stopped them and went after them to make sure they stayed away. The others tried to tell him that no one came inside headquarters that wasn't supposed to, but they couldn't tell Hagrid where Sirius ended up going. Remus didn't mind sitting with Harry, though. He missed the boy terribly, but sitting beside him made him feel a bit better. The kids continued to come and see how he was doing, but because of Hermione screaming almost frantically the last time they were sitting there, and Harry began to bleed. What's going on? Yelled Ron as he held a frantic Hermione. Just get outside, said Lupin, trying to sound calm. We need to get back to work. He could completely understand why Sirius was quickly losing his mind. All this worry was starting to affect him too, and not just him. Anyone that knew what was really going on was becoming worried and agitated. Mrs. Weasley could be seen weeping in the kitchen when no one was in there with her. Her house had been destroyed by the Ministry of Magic, and she still hadn't heard from her son Percy. She wanted to make sure he was all right, and the Ministry didn't take him into custody to interrogate him. She had managed to assure him that while most of their possessions were gone, that everyone was all right, and she had saved a few things that meant the most to the family. But that was a quick visit, and she couldn't stay long, not with people hunting all over for Harry to find out where he was. Even Percy had asked her, but she said that he was not at the house, but the last she heard, he was fine. She didn't want to lie to her son. She hated just the thought of lying to her family. But she was most worried about Harry. She had seen the bedroom's trash bucket full of bloodied gauze patches and bandages. It was becoming too much for her to take at times. Remus flipped through the book absently and looked over to Harry. He had been quiet for a while, no other wounds have shown up. He was just lying there, resting. But despite the peaceful look on his face, concern still bore a hole in his heart. Dumbledore was also worrying, but he was forced to stay back at Hogwarts. He was having mixed emotions from Poppy's report when she returned from headquarters. I don't know what is going on with that poor boy, said Madame Pomfrey, placing her bag and wand down on one of the chairs in Dumbledore's office. Is he all right? Asked Dumbledore solicitously. I cannot say for sure. The wounds on his body, it reminds me of, said Madame Pomfrey. Reminds you of what? Asked Dumbledore. Torture, said Madame Pomfrey. Dumbledore stared at his school nurse. How could he be tortured? No one in that house would harm a single hair on his head, let alone torture him. It had to be from the other realm that Harry was trapped in, but who was torturing him, and why? The king still hadn't shown up to reassure him that Harry was going to be all right and to tell him where Sirius was. It was strange he had gone most of his life without the aid of the king, and yet he couldn't seem to make a decision without first thinking of the king and desiring his counsel. No, he didn't need the king's help. All he needed to focus on was what he himself could do. Harry's plight was nothing he himself could take care of at this time. It was out of his hands. All he could do for Harry was wait for him to wake up and make sure no one gets to him and harms him. He walked over to the window and looked out onto the grounds. It was all quiet on the school grounds and down in the village, but outside the village of Hogsmeade, he could see sparks and blasts of spells crashing in the air against an invisible wall. Death Eaters were attacking the castle. Twice he had gone out and sent the Death Eaters scattering back to their own headquarters. He had only sustained minor injuries when one lucky Death Eater struck him with a spell while he was distracted with a cluster of Death Eaters to the left of him. Next time he would have to bring a few staff members down to protect the school with him. He was getting too old for this. Damn, groaned Carmichael as he rubbed his burned shoulder. How do we know the kid is even here? He could be bloody anywhere. Hogwarts is the safest place anywhere. Where else would Dumbledore keep the boy, aside from near himself? Said Nott, standing up and leaning heavily against the tree as he gasped for air. Why can't Snape come and let us in? Asked one of the younger Death Eaters. Fool, he's the Dark Lord's spy. If we ruin it, we could bring back 1,000 Potters, we'd still be killed, said McNair. Guess we should be lucky that Snape hasn't been forced to come out and forced to fight us, said Rodolphus. I can remember when he dueled the Dark Lord, he was the closest out of all of us to injuring the Dark Lord. They had retreated almost half a mile away from the castle and village to recuperate from their attack on the castle. A small campsite had been erected and Death Eaters were huddled together, plotting their next attack. What is happening with the others? Have they breached the protective spells over the ruined Weasley house yet? Asked Lucius, looking over to one of the other Death Eaters. No word on that yet, but the Ministry destroyed their house in the search for the boy. Why would they hide the boy there? Said Rookwood. It's nothing more than a crumbling shack right now. That is the only other available house. My son tells me that the Weasleys always put him up in the Ministry. He had no other summer home, said Lucius. What about the Potter family manor? Asked Nott. From what I hear, the patriarch of the Potter family has not returned to England, said Lucius. How would you know? Asked McNair. I'm related to the patriarch through a marriage of sorts, said Lucius darkly. Ah, I know who you are talking about, said Rudolphus. So do we, said a pair of voices coming from behind them. A pair of tall wizards, one with long black hair that trailed down to the back of his knees in a long braid, and the other with a short crop of blonde hair. They both had their wands in their hands and pointed at the Death Eaters. I'm flattered that you remember me, said the blonde with a smirk over to Lucius. To think you dare to take on Dumbledore, either you're getting braver or dumber. I'm betting the latter, said the black-haired man, looking around at his surroundings. The Death Eaters closed in around them, their own wands drawn. I wouldn't if I were you, said the black-haired man with a smirk. We've been in Africa for the past 14 years, said the blonde man. And things you'll remember are wilder down there, said the two of them together as they snapped their fingers. Vines erupted out of the ground and ensnared each of the Death Eaters in its deadly embrace. The more they struggled, the tighter the vines gripped the men. Keep it up, and you won't last till morning, said the black-haired man. Apparate out of here and you'll be fine. You're mad, gasped one of the Death Eaters. We worked hard to get this close to the village. You'll never get this close again, said the blonde. These things will seek out you and anyone else like you if you come near this place again. You're more than welcome to test out its range, but after a few times, it'll kill you to keep you from pestering it again. The sound of cracks popped around the darkness until the two wizards were left standing alone. Come on, Leroy, I've got some questions to ask the old man, said the black-haired man. Hope he likes the new flowers we brought. It ought to beef up security for him, said Leroy with a smile. Harry felt himself floating in the air. His eyes were closed, and he couldn't find the strength to open them, as if they were two lead slabs over his lids. He couldn't hear anything or smell anything. It was complete and utter silence and blackness. Perhaps he had died. He had laid down on the bed and fell asleep. Maybe he passed away in his sleep. It was the way he would want to go, but not this young in his life. He didn't get to see Sirius again, Ron, Hermione, or anyone else for that matter. He wanted to know how Frodo and Sam would make out. Would they be able to bring the ring to Mordor? And Anya, no, she moved on with her life, surely, just like he told her to. There was a slim chance that he would see her again, and if he had died, then there was no chance. Suddenly the pressure on his body lessened, and he could begin to move his fingers, then his toes, and then finally his eyes. He looked around himself slowly. He was floating in the room he had just fallen asleep in. Harry turned his head and entire body and saw himself sleeping peacefully below. What the? Asked Harry. Greetings, lad, said the ghostly figure flying up to meet him. Welcome to your non-corporeal form. Harry recoiled and stared at the man, then he looked down, saw that he was just now a pale shadow of what he was. It was like he was a Hogwarts ghost, just not as shiny and brightly translucent as they were. So, am I? Asked Harry. Dead. Thankfully, no, said the ghost with a smile. You've just become an observer. I hope you didn't think I was going to let you just sleep all this time. What would you learn by just resting? I thought you said Harry, looking at his hands in awe. You get bored in the afterlife, son. You need to poke fun at someone, said King Mandembor with a smile. And to be honest, you were the first person I have talked to in this world since I died. He finally had the opportunity to ask questions and hopefully get some answers. No one seemed to know the whole story. Perhaps the source would be able to give him more answers. Listen, I've got a lot of questions, like, Why me? Asked Harry. What's with the stones? How did they kill you? Easy, lad, said King Mandembor. We have a lot of time. What is the most pressing question on your mind? Why you? Harry nodded. Well, to be honest, I didn't choose you at first. You came to this world partially on accident. The one that sent you here didn't realize that you would be in contention for the magical world's highest power, said King Medembor. If she had, she would have sent herself, no doubt. So you did come from our world, said Harry. There was one answer. He'd have to keep track and let Elrond and Celeborn know if he ever saw them again and if he could remember. That I did, but after a while I became enchanted with this world. I wanted to make this my new home. The one we both come from was, and still is, a corrupted mess. The simplicity of this world was refreshing, and its people, the people, devoid of such wanting nonsense that most people in our world have. When you get back to your world, I believe that you will understand exactly where I am coming from. So you came here to escape our home, said Harry. The balance can be maintained by the king anywhere. He doesn't have to stay in the castle, said the king with an adolescent shrug. Harry didn't want to go into what the balance was. That wasn't all the pressing at the moment. So, me being chosen for this is just an accident, said Harry. A very happy accident, said King Medembor, correcting Harry lightly. I've seen hundreds of possible candidates come and go, but you, he smiled. You are by far the best possible choice. How do you figure? Asked Harry, frowning slightly. Dear boy, where do I start? Said King Medembor with a laugh and a gesture of his hands. Harry looked away. I can come up with several different choices. And that's one of the reasons why you are the best choice. You don't want it, said King Mandembor. You know what it's like to live without. You don't want everything. You just want the basics. A family, a home to call your own. Nothing more than that. Harry scratched the back of his head. He could feel his face turning red. Any other questions? Asked King Medembor pleasantly. You didn't really answer the first one, said Harry. Not to your satisfaction, but it will do for me, said King Mandembor. Now, these other questions. He sighed. Well, what's with the stones? Where did they come from? Asked Harry. They are a manifestation of my powers here. Unlike wizards, they cannot be drained of magical energy so easily, said King Medembor. Have you ever been drained? Asked Harry curiously. He had remembered the battle on Caradhras. He had never felt so empty before. No, but it never hurts to be prepared, like this room, for instance, said the king, gesturing around himself to the room they hovered in. Ha! This room, only I or someone I allow may be able to enter here. No malicious or will use self-absorbed personality may enter this chamber, said King Medembor. Your body is safe here. Now, let's take a small journey. You'll find this amusing, I gather. He led Harry through the wall and into the open air, hovering over the curse-ridden land of Mordor, drifting like wisps of clouds. See what happens when you value power over wisdom, said King Mandembor. He had a fantastic mind and great power, but he longer wished to share his knowledge with the world, but instead wished to rule it. Harry looked down at the countless orcs and trolls that tromped around the barren landscape. They were most likely on their way to Minas Tirith, and each one looked as merciless as the next. Harry could hardly believe his eyes. How were they supposed to contend with such force? Every time they'd knock one down, 10 would be there to replace it. Come, let's not dwell here, said the king, coaxing Harry to follow him downward. They fell to the ground beside the Black Tower lightly and made their way slowly across the scarred land. It was almost 40 minutes of gliding along the dark valley walls when Harry saw something caught his eye. Hey, how often do two orcs travel by themselves? Asked Harry, floating down to the two figures trying to lurk in the shadows. King Medembor followed him down. Never. They travel in battalions in Mordor, said the king, looking over to Harry. Why do you ask, lad? Harry floated above the pair of them and watched them carefully. These guys, they seem a little timid for orcs, don't you think? The king looked at them and then smiled. They aren't what they appear to be, said King Mandembor wisely. How are you holding up, Mr. Frodo? Asked one of the ironclad orcs. It's Sam, said Harry excitedly, and Frodo. The king smiled, but then the smile switched to a worried countenance. Quick, lad, come here, said the king suddenly. What? They can't see us, said Harry as the king latched onto his arm. It's not them I'm worried about, said the king, pulling Harry towards the darkened rocks. The sky then burned with red-hot fire coming from the tall, dark tower of Mordor. The flaming eye hovering above flashed brightly, and a loud scream echoed across the valleys and down the plains. It seems that he just discovered you were gone, said King Medembor. You sure he can't get into that room? asked Harry with a worried tone in his voice. He didn't want to think what would happen if that nut got a hold of his unconscious body. If he could, he would have possession of one of the stones, said King Dumbledore, looking up at the sky towards the eye enshrouded in flame. It's in there, asked Harry in shock. The day I died in this world, I was going to make a grand entrance onto the Pelennor Fields, but I was interrupted. I had forgotten it in my bedroom and was on my way to retrieve it, said King Dumbledore. The Onyx Stone has the ability to transport you anywhere in Middle-earth. That would have come in handy at the beginning of this journey, said Harry. This is turning into some twisted version of the Wizard of Oz, thought Harry with a groan. I can imagine, said the king with a smile. Now, let's get out of here, before that eye sees us. Can he? Asked Harry quietly. He's caught me once, quite a long time ago, said the king, though I don't think he quite knew what to make of me when he caught a glimpse of me. So, are we safe? Asked Harry. As long as we stay out of that eye's sight, we are, said the king. Come, let's get out of Mordor. There is nothing we can do for your friends. They can neither see nor hear you. He pulled Harry closer to the shadows, and towards the far black metal gate. Where are we going? Asked Harry. The end of our journey will be Minas Tirith, just to see how they are holding up, said the king, pulling Harry close to the rocks and through some of them. Hold up! If the stone that transports you from one place to the other is in the room, how come we don't just apparate out of there? Asked Harry. A simple solution, unfortunately, we cannot. Sauron, as powerful as he is, can negate that particular stone just by being around it, said King Dumbledore. How can he? Asked Harry. I'm not sure, pure malice perhaps, but when I tried to escape while I was alive, of course, I could not. I tried to summon the stone to me, but I wasn't able to summon it from my room, which I was able to do quite easily in any part of my castle, said the king. How come you didn't just summon it and save all the walking? Asked Harry. Dear lad, just because you have the power doesn't mean you should be complacent and ignore to invigorate your body with exercise. When I was attacked, all I could do was secure the stone to the most protected room in my castle, when I banished the rest of them, said King Dumbledore, keeping a lookout on the eye positioned high above them, and frankly it was good for your world that he never gained possession of that stone, as it would be able to take him to our world. So, there's no getting to it right now, said Harry, trying not to think about Sauron and his world, muggle and wizard alike would stand no chance. Not right now, there would be no point. We cannot escape with that particular stone at this time, not without substantial trouble, said the king. We will be able to get that stone out at a later moment, preferably when the Dark Lord's focus has either been completely taken away from us or has been shattered. How do we shatter it? Asked Harry. Your hobbit friends there, they'll have to destroy the ring, said the ghostly king, pointing to where Sam and Frodo were once standing. Harry looked at the tower as they glided towards the Black Gate. He'd have to wait till Sauron was defeated to get one of the final stones, and he still didn't find all of them yet. How was he to get the stones he had yet to collect? Sirius wanted to strangle that sorry excuse for a spook when he got back to his own world. He was now following an elf, fellow man, and dwarf into a dark and decaying cave with bones and cobwebs all over the place. He wasn't fond of spiders, and he certainly wasn't on friendly terms with dead people. Why the hell am I here? Muttered Sirius, looking around in the darkness. You wanted to come, said Strider, leading the way with a torch. Only because the king told me to stick to you if he wasn't already dead. I would swear to everything holy that I'm going to kill him, said Sirius darkly. And you can't tell me that you three were more than excited to come down here. Gimli said nothing, but tightened his grip on his axe. It didn't fare any better for Sirius when they traveled further down the cavernous hole. They walked down into the depths of the mountain in almost absolute silence. Each footstep across the dirt-covered stone path held the chance of them cracking a bone underfoot. I hate this, muttered Sirius as he kicked a skull off the path. You've said that repeatedly, said Strider tiredly as he waved the torch from side to side. This man had been complaining non-stop since he walked face-first into a spider's web. He was still pulling webbing out of his hair, and he was becoming increasingly jumpy. The first time his boot had cracked through a femur, he nearly shouted in horror. He had to give the man some credit. He didn't scream, or, as Harry put it one day, freak out completely, just enough to annoy the ranger. Though, he had to admit to himself he was ducking down pretty low in the cavern, just in case another swarm of bats came out to meet them. He was not fond of those creatures, not even a little, and he had nearly dropped his torch when the cloud of bats came pouring out of the cavern when they first entered. Try and keep quiet. We're nearing the heart of the mountain, growled Strider softly. The spirits, they are uneasy, said Legolas, looking around sharply. So's my stomach, thought Sirius to himself. I hope we can get away from here soon. They traveled down until the paths came to an end, and they were standing in a large open area, like a giant beehive. Each open part of the wall held the body of a fallen soldier, but they were fallen no more. They were now swarming around them, and they could attack them, as if they were still breathing. "I'd give anything to see Peeves right now," said Sirius, looking around. He looked around slightly. He was hoping that the king's voice would come to him and offer him some reassurances. It never came. "Where the hell are you? Now that I need you, I can't bloody find you," he muttered. "Where the hell are you?" "There we are, safe for the time being," said the king, as they drifted towards the rocky hill in front of the Black Gate. "The time being?" asked Harry as he gasped against a large stone. He may have been non-corporeal, but it was still hard work trying to get from one shadow in Mordor to the next. "Remember, lad, we'll have to get back to the tower before the Dark Lord falls," said King Meatenboar. "For what?" asked Harry. "To get the stone," said the king, ushering Harry even further away from the gate. "If Sauron falls and your body is still in there and your spirit is out here, I'm dead," said Harry. "Worse than that," said the king with a sad expression. "You won't even be at peace. You'll cease utterly." "Then why bring me out?" asked Harry. "While you are unable to take the stone out in my castle, there is nothing to stop you from claiming any other stone," said Meatenboar, looking around. "How?" "I'm unable to take the stones from their designated hiding spots. But not my heir," said King Meatenboar with a kind smile. "But I?" said Harry. "Lad, I know you don't want to assume the throne, but unfortunately we have no choice. You have no choice. You'll never escape in time if we try and get you out the normal way," said the king. "But," said Harry, "that stone allows you to transport yourself anywhere. It's not like the others. This requires a royal command, of the highest level. No king here could command that stone," said King Meatenboar. "I don't understand," said Harry with an exasperated sigh, tossing his head in exasperation. "I suppose I'll have to explain the stones a bit further," said King Meatenboar. "Please do," said Harry. The two ghostly figures made their way a little further away from the Black Gate. King Meatenboar didn't want to test the range of Sauron's vision, so they continued on further, seeking somewhere inconspicuous to talk. Finally, the king felt that they were safe behind one of the large hills in front of Mordor. "Start your questions, lad. I won't know what to elaborate on," said King Meatenboar with a smile. Harry looked down at the ground. Where was he to start? He had questions, not all of them on the stones. There was a few that were on other things, but those could wait. "Where are those stones from?" asked Harry. "I thought I told you," said the king with a questioning look. "Just tell me again," said Harry with a groan. "If I'm going to take the throne, I want to know everything I can." The king smiled. "But I'm doing this under protest," muttered Harry. The king heard Harry's words, but he let it slide. He could understand the boy's frustrations, and he would placate the boy all he wanted. "Those stones originated from our world. I created them before I made my way here," said the king. Why would you make them if you could just use magic here anyway?" asked Harry. "Normal magic would make more sense. You didn't need a different stone for each thing you wanted." "What makes you think you can use our normal magic here?" said King Meatenboar with a smile. "There is something not even all the kings and queens could ever figure out, that stops all normal magic from transferring over to the other world. It might be the reason why they never wanted to come here. Being unarmed is a frightening idea." "I can understand that, though, for a bit. I thought it was right fun." "So Gandalf wouldn't be able to come to our world and create magic?" asked Harry in wonder. "He'd have to do something like what you did." "That's right," said the king, floating back and forth in front of Harry. He was overjoyed that the boy had decided to take the crown, even if it was just to get home, unless there was another way that he didn't know of. But that was not likely. He felt guilty that he had to tell the boy his only hope in getting home was to take his place as king of the magical world, but the chance to finally rest in peace, it was worth it, and he would endure the guilt till the end of time. "So the stones came from our world, and you gave them powers," said Harry, repeating what the king was saying, just so he could understand. "That's right," said King Meatenboar. "I scoured the royal vaults for the most beautiful of gems to pick from. I had a lot to choose from. A small urn of jewels from those vaults is worth 10 times a muggle king's ransom." "Is there any limits with them?" asked Harry. He could guess a few, but he wanted to know if there was something that he didn't know about, just in case I use them again and something happens. "Good question," said the king with a smile. "Let's see, each one has a limitation of sorts. The opal stone, while it stalls time, but it doesn't last forever. The slowing down will only last perhaps a half hour at best. One would think that a half hour is more than enough." "Sometimes no," said Harry with a smile. "Exactly," said the king with a smile. "Sometimes you'll be up against an entire army, and you're grossly outnumbered. You need to move very fast. The Beryl Stone has a fantastic ability. It gives you far sight and the ability to look at things up close to examine them properly. You can't see through people or objects, though, so you'd best use it on an open area to use it fully, said the king. I don't think I got that one yet, said Harry. Yes, you did. It was with Treebeard, said the king lightly. You didn't get the chance to use it, but perhaps you will soon. Harry looked at the king in confusion. How did he know when and where he got the stones? It had been centuries since he sent the stones out into the world. How would know where they all were and when he got them? He decided to save the question for later. What about the amethyst? Asked Harry. That one is my personal favorite, said the king with a smile. As long as weather is present, the sun, clouds, water, fog, the possibilities are endless. Except underground, said Harry with a smile. There's no weather underground. Correct. So you'll have to use that stone above the ground, which normally is not a problem, unless you find some creative way to bring about some weather, said the king. The turquoise stone, that one has the biggest limitation. You can only heal as much as your body will allow, and you cannot bring back the dead. As much as my body can handle? Asked Harry. Learn this lesson well, lad. You can't save everyone, said the king somberly. Harry looked at the king in silence. He didn't try and save everyone, did he? He shifted uncomfortably as he floated in the air. Harry had to think about what other stones he currently had. He didn't want to dwell on the prospect that he was that easy to read, or that naive. What about the diamond, sapphire, topaz, and all the other ones? Asked Harry. Well, I suppose the diamond is the one that has easiest limitation to overcome, said King Meadenboar. How? Asked Harry. You are only limited by what samples you give the stones. Animal samples, that is. It won't turn you into different people, said King Meadenboar. The sapphire is another story. You need to have some water around you somewhere. It could manipulate bodies of water, puddles, even clouds, but if there is no water, there is no point using the stone. Couldn't you store water in there and use it like a canteen or something? Asked Harry. The sapphire was one of the stones that Treebeard had, and he never got the chance to try it out for real either. King Meadenboar looked at the boy with a slight smile on his face. I've never had the need to use the stone like that. You'll have to find out when you gain possession of the stones again. Now, about these other stones, the topaz, really the only limitation is your imagination. That's the one that moves stones and dirt, said Harry, nodding. Not just that, it manipulates the earth. What you can do with it is up to you to find out, said the king. Now, the emerald one, you have to have plants around, said Harry. Very good, said the king proudly. He was happy that the boy was joining in the conversation and finding out the limitations on his own without the king having to spell it out for him. One thing, though, said Harry quickly. Why was it acting oddly in Fangorn? It's the Ents. They draw extra power from it, strangely enough. I'm amazed the stone didn't land there instead of Lothlorien, said the king with a faint smile. It could have helped the Ents immensely, I believe. I'm sure the Entwives wouldn't have left if the stone had been there. It's a pity. Harry stared. Now he wanted to ask the question that come across his mind a while ago. How did you know I found it there? And about the one with Treebeard? Silly boy, I've been watching you since the beginning, said the king, shaking his head. Ever since you arrived as forcefully as you have, I've been keeping an eye on you. But how come you didn't help me? Asked Harry. Who says I haven't? Said the king with a mischievous smile. I haven't seen you, said Harry slowly. But you've heard me surely, doesn't my voice sound familiar? Said the king with a sly smile. Harry stared at the man, then it dawned on him. Wait, Valerian? Said Harry. Exactly, said the king with a laugh. How? I possessed your sword. It seemed to be the most convenient way to guide you when you really needed it, said the king with a smile. I thought I was going mad, said Harry shortly. Do you know how odd it was hearing someone talking to me through a sword? I can imagine, but lad, I couldn't find another way to speak to you, without destroying any hope of you becoming and choosing to take the throne on your own, said the king. That didn't go well, did it? Said Harry. He was a little irked that the king was trying to push him to take the throne early on, and not only that, he didn't tell him who he was to start with. It went well for a while, you learned a few moves, though, didn't you? Said King Meadenboar with an encouraging smile. Well, sure, said Harry. The king smiled fondly. Lad, I know you don't want the crown. I know you could name a dozen or so people you feel that deserves the crown more than you. But I've seen so many people in our world and in this, and lad, you stick out like a diamond on a black sheet. Harry turned his face downward and had a faint blush on his face. You know, you don't have to stay king forever. You may relinquish the crown to someone you feel would be a better ruler, said the king with a sly smile. Harry looked up, the blush gone. Really? The rules of a king or queen are absolute, But there is an escape clause, replied the king, still smiling. If you don't find yourself able to handle the job and you want to be noble and leave before the world is sent into a death spiral, you are able to find someone whom you believe to be better and you can make him your replacement. But they have to believe that you aren't qualified and they have to agree to the change in command. Harry sat and thought. Now back to these stones, the pearl, as you had seen from that dream I gave you. You've been giving me those whacked out dreams, shouted Harry. Well, I couldn't exactly come up with an easier way to teach you how to use the stones. Did you not like them? Asked the king innocently. That last one was a bit freaky, said Harry. Well, that was more of a warning than anything. A warning? That your greatest enemy has entered this world, said the king with a somber look. Oh, that's just great. And he has the Jade Stone, the most deadly of them all. Sirius gasped for air as they left the mountain, and its dead population. He hadn't ever had to deal with anything like that before. Skeletons lying all over the place, cobwebs lacing the sides of the wall, and the entryways of different tunnels, rats skittering around looking for anything to eat, and on top of all that, dead soldiers that came back to live and would not stay down for long. Just the sight of the king of the dead made Sirius nearly sick with fright. The king's spirit looked decayed and worm-eaten. He hoped all spirits didn't look like that. He didn't want to think what James would look like after so many years. Any thought that possessed his mind was focused on death. What it was like to die, what happens afterward, and what you might look like to someone else. Legolas had to stop him from placing a knife to his throat to end it right then. Black, fight it, said Legolas, pulling the knife out of his hands. Sirius shook his head rapidly and the thoughts dissipated. He gasped, looking around at the cavernous tombs. You have to keep your mind steeled. This place will put a spell on you if you let your fear cloud your mind, said Legolas. Would have been nice to know beforehand, muttered Sirius as he put his knife away and drew his sword. Sirius didn't even bother to look back at the King of the Dead when he vowed he would join them. Fine, yes, thank you, said Sirius weakly as he hurried away from the skull-buried door. He didn't want to take his knife out again. Come along, Black, said Aragorn, walking swiftly down the hill. What next? Said Sirius, holding his stomach tightly. He had just finished retching into a nearby bush after what nearly happened came crashing into his consciousness. It dawned on him that he just about left Harry behind in this primitive world where he was no doubt, in his mind, somewhere hurt, cold, hungry, and needing of his godfather. Now we board the Black Cause airships, said Aragorn. Great, from ghouls to seasickness, my day just keeps getting better and better, growled Sirius as he struggled to catch up to the three of them. How are we to take on the Armada? Asked Legolas as they ran non-stop to the wide river below. 3 ships we'll be able to take on easily, but more than that, said Gimli gruffly. They stopped at the beach, awaiting for the ships to come arrive at the shore. Strider had seen the sails off into the distance. No, all they had to do was plan and wait for the ships to come closer. We will have the army of the dead behind us. Those we do not fell ourselves. They will deal with them, said Aragorn, kneeling down in the sand and peering off into the horizon. How do you know they will come, said Sirius. They could just turn and run like they did the last time, right? They will hold their oath true. They know what everlasting suffering is like. They will not miss this chance, said Gimli wisely. Though, I hope we can use them at Minas Tirith. Sounds like a little out of our league just going by ourselves. Are you scared? Asked Legolas teasingly. Not at all. I just want to make sure someone has your back when you run into trouble, smirked Gimli. Sirius looked off into the distance, in the direction where Aragorn said Minas Tirith lay. He was worried about Harry. The king said that he was in danger, and he'd have to get to him, hopefully in time. I wouldn't worry. Harry has quite a lot of luck on his side, said Strider carefully. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the man's worried expression. He doesn't back in our world. Didn't matter what sort of danger it was, it would come to him, said Sirius, not caring that he and the ranger were talking cordially with each other. And we nearly lose him every single time. Yes, but he survives, said Aragorn with a faint smile. And that can use up a lifetime of luck when the danger is great enough. I know, but all this, him getting hurt, it terrifies me, said Sirius. I miss so much of his life, and now that I have him, I don't want to lose him. I don't want to either, thought Strider to himself. I lost his dad. I lost his mother. And then I didn't get to see him for almost 12 years. I'd give anything to go back, if just to stop myself from chasing Peter, said Sirius, kicking a rock into the mighty river in front of him. We all have things we would rather not do in our past. It's just a matter of moving on and doing what you must, said Legolas. Aye, said Gimli. Sirius looked over to the three of them, and a small smile played on his lips. They were getting along a lot better now, at least him and Aragorn. He got along pretty well with Legolas and Gimli pretty well already. They were all just playing nice for now. The prize ahead wasn't just a free world for them, it was hopefully keeping Harry. And Sirius wasn't going to give up without a fight, so he supposed he would have to buckle down and get ready to fight as dirty as he could. The black ships came closer to the shore, and the Corsair captain stood beside the helm, scanning the horizon with a disdainful sneer. It wouldn't much longer till they could take their place in the army of Sauron and bring about the fall of Minas Tirith and its pitiful people. They had been promised rich rewards if they would come and help in the plunder of the White City, and with the treasures that were sure to be in there, it was the most tempting of offers. They passed the forbidding White Mountains, and as they did, he could hear his men whispering fearfully. The Corsair sailors were not weak men or men with superstitious tendencies, but even the hardest of sailor knew to fear the White Mountains and their haunted population. Tales had been told of a few ships that foolishly drifted too close to the shores, were boarded by spectral figures, warriors of old, and the ship and its foolhardy crew were ripped apart, killing them and in turn joining the specters. Meanwhile, the ship was reduced to nothing but splinters littering the riverbed. All feared the White Mountains, except for the captain. "What are you vermin whispering about?" shouted the captain harshly. "Don't you know what that is, Captain? It's the Haunted Mountain. They say an army of dead soldiers lay there," said the helmsman quietly. He then gave a bone-deep shudder. "You couldn't force me up that wretched mountainside, not for all the gold in all the world." "Well, then it's a good thing we're not, you sniveling dogs," sneered the captain nastily. "We're heading for Osgiliath now if you little maidens can get us there." Despite the fear that his men obviously showed to the White Mountain, he feared the wrath of the Dark Lord Sauron, which they would most assuredly receive if they didn't make it to Osgiliath at the right moment. He had heard rumors of what happened to those who didn't rise to Sauron's expectations, and that made him shudder. Old tales of an old mountain-born race of men paled in comparison. Suddenly, a shriek came upon the wind, and the men stopped in their tracks on the deck. They turned their fear-ridden eyes towards the shore and saw a great tidal wave of greenish fog coming down out of the mountainside. At first it seemed to be some oddly colored mist, but this was no harmless fog. They could see frightening phantasms wielding swords, shields, spears, and bows and arrows, poised and ready to do some carnage. Their faces twisted, skin with small holes where green, quivering maggots dug themselves deeper into the flesh, skulls with eyes burning bright within their sockets. "They're coming!" yelled the first mate frantically. "We're lost!" shouted the helmsman as he left the helm and jumped off the side of the ship and into the river. "You cowards! They're nothing but spirits," shouted the captain, drawing his sword. But that didn't stop the rest of the crew from leaping off the sides of the ship to escape the dead spirits coming down the mountain to wreak their vengeance on them. But as they did so, the ghouls would hover over the water, keeping the Corsairs under, taunting them and stabbing them with their spectral weapons, and it was there that they slowly drowned. "You won't take me," shouted the captain. He turned and saw two men with long brown hair come at him with swords drawn and rushing towards him. The blades of a glimmering virgin sword, and an ancient-looking sword, was the last thing he had ever seen. Legolas and Gimli were beside the helm and helping the rest of the sailors off the ship with both their axe and bow. Soon there was apparently no one left on the ship. The Corsairs were defeated. "Well, that was easy," said Sirius as he wiped the blood off his sword. "Though, I'm not too overly fond of killing someone. Never did that before. Not hands-on, anyway." "First time is always the hardest," said Legolas softly. "Let's hope there's no one down below decks," said Gimli as he turned to the door leading below. "Oi!" shouted a few crewmen coming up from down below. They drew their weapons and charged up the stairs. Sirius was standing beside the open cabin and slammed the hilt of his sword into the first one's face, and as he staggered back, the rest of them did as well. Sirius moved aside so Legolas could take out the others with his bow. Once they were down, Sirius looked amongst the three of them, and he smiled. "Man, that was kind of fun. Little sadistic of me saying that, but it was quite invigorating." Aragorn looked over to the otherworldly man with a shocked look. "Where were you 2 hours ago?" asked Gimli. He failed to mention that even he himself was a little hesitant to strike at thin air whilst in the mountains. Sirius looked at the dwarf in shock. Those were ghosts. These were just normal guys. Legolas rolled his eyes. "So you're ready to fight now?" said Aragorn as he leapt to the helm to steer the ship away from the shore where it was drifting. The ghosts took control of the ships behind them as they sailed almost silently through the water. "Maybe, guess I should practice a bit," said Sirius. "A bit," said Aragorn with a smirk. "Yeah, all right, a lot," retorted Sirius. Voldemort struggled as he tried to make it down the road, leaning heavily on a stout stick. He had lost almost everything. He had lost his horse, the staff he had been given, and his money. He only had the whatever was left of the clothes on his back, his sword, a few of the weapons he had gathered, and the stone. The little wench had stolen his horse, and he swore that when he caught up with her, she was no longer going to be bait, she was dead. He wasn't going to stop till he had impaled her with all the weapons he had floating behind him. He had no ally now. All he had was himself and the stone. There was no one to help him, but all in all, it made things so much simpler. Everyone was now a target. Anya galloped as hard and as fast as she could to Minas Tirith. She had to take a long detour when saw a vision of the large army standing beneath the white walls of the city. The last vision she had saved her life from certain death. She had no choice but to heed the warning that was now before her. She circled around for many miles around the field of Pelennor to avoid the vast army to try and enter the White City on the sly. That was not a likely event. The army was still laying siege to the great city of Gondor. She tried making her way far south when she heard a galloping coming up behind her. "Halt!" said a pair of horsemen riding up beside her. They took her reins and steered her away from her course. They were scouts, and when they saw a single woman riding nervously towards the mountains, they rode furiously to catch her. While they did not know if she was friend, foe, or even some innocent traveler, they could not let her go any further in the direction she was heading. If she had continued on, she would have been riding to her doom. If she would take the wrong turn at almost any moment to her left, she would have been shot down out of the saddle. They had so far slain 15 orc archers hidden on the mountainside and prepared to take the life and provisions of any passing traveler, and if it was too big of target for them, they would have fired messages to the other scouts hidden on the mountain to send to the army of Sauron. As they neared her and led her back to the camp where King Theoden was, they didn't believe that she was an agent of the enemy. She was too young and pretty, despite what she looked like at the moment. Her hair was disheveled, her face marred with dirt and bruises, and her dress was filthy and torn. The poor fair thing needed help, and they were just the gentlemen for the job. She looked fearfully between the two of them, thinking they were the enemy. She tried vainly to get away, but the riders seemed to think that she was just unused to the saddle and tried to keep her firmly in place, all the while watching where they put their hands on her. She was about to yank on the reins to get the horse to stop when she saw the crest on their armor. She remembered travelers wearing the same crest once in Bree, a white horse. They were from Rohan. She almost laughed and cried from relief. She was safe. They weren't going to hurt her, right? Rohan, from what she heard, was a kingdom of good people. Hopefully that wasn't a lie. They took her to their camp, many, many miles away from the White City, where the riders of Rohan and the king were waiting for the finalization of their plans were made, and then they would ride off. They took the girl directly to the king's tent and spoke gently to her. They handled her carefully, as she already looked ready to faint. "We're taking you to the king. He should know what we can do for you," said one of the younger guards. "Perhaps we can see about sending you back to Adora's or Helm's Deep." "Lord Theoden," said the one scout loudly, causing Anya to flinch horribly. The king stepped out with his nephew and niece at his side. "What have you to report?" "Who is this?" said the king, looking at the young woman with shocked eyes. Eomer's eyes widened as well, and his lips twitched slightly. "Anya," came a small voice. Anya turned and saw one of the hobbits that Harry left with. Did that mean that Harry was here? "Master Hobbit, oh, thank heavens. It's a relief to see someone familiar after all this time," said Anya with a tearful laugh. Her knees felt about ready to give out at any moment. "This is Anya," said Mary excitedly. "Who is she?" asked the king, with a faint smile. She was a barmaid at Bree, she and Harry, but Anya began to blush so heavily that Mary stopped. But Anya took his break in speech to speak herself, despite the heat in her face. The moment he mentioned Harry, it drove her mind on to speak, and her legs be damned. "Is he here? I have something important to tell him," said Anya imploringly to Mary. "He left for Minas Tirith a long time ago," said Mary worriedly. "Is something wrong?" "There is a man after him, a terrible, awful man," he said. "He knew Harry, but he wants to kill him," said Anya worriedly. "He's so powerful, he has the ability to have weapons turn on their owners. He'll cut Harry to ribbons. We must save him." The others raised their brows at the description that Anya gave them. Sirius was out to kill Harry, but he said that he was Harry's godfather, and Harry always spoke highly of Sirius. The man had lied. They let Aragorn lead him right to the lad. The two mysterious men sat in Dumbledore's office, tears falling down their faces. "So, James and Lily are gone?" said Rudolph thickly. "I'm afraid so," said Dumbledore somberly. "I tried to have you contacted, but," he added a weak smile, "you were always known for not sticking around when abroad." "I can't believe it. I just can't believe it," said Leroy. "What about the baby? What about Harry?" asked Rudolph weakly. "Tell me we didn't lose our little monster," said Leroy Tears, preparing for a second run down his face. He's alive, but not well at the moment, said Dumbledore. What's wrong with him? Asked Leroy quickly. I cannot begin to put it into words, said Dumbledore, but I can have Minerva take you to him. Why can't you take us? Asked Rudolph. You don't need to worry about those Death Eaters. There may be more behind them, said Dumbledore, shaking his head. I'll have to stay and protect the school. Rudolph and Leroy looked between each other and nodded. All right, we'll go with Minerva. One thing, said Dumbledore. Yes, said Rudolph. Do not use magic in the room, said Dumbledore. What's the Jade Stone do? Asked Harry. It controls metal, weapons, for example. He could turn your own weapons against you, said King Meanenbor, so everyone in Middle-earth is in danger. We gotta stop him, said Harry quickly. And we will, but like I said, you'll want to collect all the other stones in order to defeat him, said King Meanenbor. If he manages to get back to our world, then we're doomed, said Harry. His mouth opened and his eyes widened in fear. If you can wield the rest of the stones, then you will be able to hopefully defeat Voldemort, said the king. Hang on, I thought you said that I need all of the stones to get home and to be willing to claim the throne, said Harry. I did, but what I didn't say was that if this Voldemort, being a wizard, he can see the stones, if he were to collect all of the stones, he could usurp my throne, said King Meanenbor. What? Said Harry. I don't understand. Lad, these stones work in both worlds, and these stones override any magical law known to wizard kind, said King Meanenbor. But enough talk, he looked off into the distance. We'll go and get the ruby. The pearl is safe for the moment. Is there a way to get the Jade Stone, even with Voldemort there? Asked Harry. Not without the pearl, and to use the stone, you need to be solid, said King Meanenbor. But he wouldn't be able to see me. How could he stop me? Replied Harry. He never lets go of that stone, and with as dark as his mind is, I can understand why, said the king. Now, come. Harry and the king drifted as quickly as they could across rocky landscape. All the while, Harry's mind was racing with the facts that he learned. The king was not willing to be completely open with him, though he could understand, sort of. It had been so long since the king had talked to anyone, and he had been murdered, so trusting anyone is flung out the window. He learned the limitations of most of the stones. That would help him when he would gather up the rest. Someone was now in this world to help him. Not that the king was willing to tell him who it was. Voldemort was also in Middle-earth, and was in possession of the Jade Stone. And if Harry didn't collect the stones, Voldemort might, and that would prove to bring about the end of the world. If he thought the task of finding the stones was hard, it was now even harder. It took a long time for the two of them to reach where the king said the stones were. They were in a foul-smelling marsh, with tongues of flames hovering over different pools of water. There were dead bodies of men and elves and even orcs floating in the water, but not quite breaking the surface. What the hell is this place? Asked Harry. This was where the last alliance took its final stance, and here are where the fallen lay in eternal unrest, said the king somberly. See those flames? He said, pointing down at a nearby tongue of flame. Yes, said Harry, his eyes unable to tear from the nearest floating elf. That comes from the ruby. That particular stone wields fire. Once we remove the ruby, perhaps the spirits here may finally rest, said the king. So how am I to get it? Asked Harry, finally looking away from the elf. Where is it? Underneath, said the king, pointing to the heart of the marsh. So, how am I supposed to get it? Asked Harry, deadpanned. He couldn't help but keep thinking back down to the elf lying in the water. The king looked at Harry in surprise, and then looked at him up and down. You're a ghost, lad. Oh, right, said Harry sheepishly. He then slid down through the ground, but then came up right away. I don't wanna, said Harry, his eyes almost popping out of his head. Why not? Asked King Meanenbor, quirking an eyebrow. I see dead people, said Harry. The king rolled his eyes. The king and Harry were still in the marshes of the dead. Harry had seen almost a city full of ghosts floating under the water. Each face looked decayed and gaunt. The sight of them sent Harry shooting back up onto the surface, especially when they would reach out and try to latch onto him with their rotten hands. They had gotten a hold of him once, and as they touched him, he saw his own skin begin to take on the same worm-eaten look that these specters had and begin to take on a monomous glow. He also felt a cold sensation creep up his arm and into face, as if there were small cold maggots trying to reach all over his body and burrow into his flesh. He had barely time to escape before the ghoulish figure dragged him down to join their ranks. Lad, were you able to see the stone? Asked the king. No. Something else held my attention, snapped Harry. Take it easy. We'll be able to get it. Just calm down, said the king, holding up his hands placatingly. The king looked around the marsh slowly. Sinking beneath the surface to search would not do them any good, especially if the specters were going to be malicious, and they would need to find the stone, just to calm the spirits and allow them to rest at last after what felt like an eternity. But they needed to go where the spirits dwell in order to find the stone quickly. Unless, "Come, lad, we need to find the one candle that is unlike the rest," said the king. "Say what?" asked Harry. All the flames looked the same. "No, there is one candle that's different," said the king. "We need to find it. I'm sure that is the easier way to go about this." "Is that where the stone is?" said Harry, stunned. "I believe so, yes." "Then why were you asking if I could see it underground?" shouted Harry angrily. "The ruby we would be able to see easily, as opposed to the one candle different than the rest," said King Menabor slowly. "It'll take a little while longer, but we'll be able to succeed, hopefully without intruding on the spirits." "Couldn't come up with idea before I get caught by those things," muttered Harry. "Being king doesn't mean that all the decisions you make is the correct one," said Menabor. They examined each candle carefully. Nothing was out of the ordinary for the countless candles that they had already inspected, and there were hundreds more for them to check. The day was ending, and nightfall was beginning to fall. They were not rushing to find it before nightfall, but they needed to find the stone soon. For who knew when or if Frodo and Sam would destroy the ring, and that would be the only time to escape the tower. But it wasn't just Frodo and Sam to worry about, there was also Voldemort. If he were to get to Minas Tirith and find the pearl, then there was nothing he could do against him. Not if he still held on to the Jade Stone. They would have to hope that Voldemort didn't know about the pearl and keep away from there. As Harry was examining a trio of candles in front of him, the king's voice shouted out, "Here it is." Harry floated as fast as he could over to where the king was, and in front of where he was standing was a white flame candle. They couldn't see it for the rocks that surrounded it. There was one body in the pool underneath it, an elf with long black hair, but Harry couldn't see the ruby right away. "Where's the stone?" asked Harry. "Look closely, the shield laying behind him," said the king. "It has the ruby lodged on it, though I'm not sure he knew the stone was there in the first place." "So, how do we get it out?" said Harry. "Well, to start with, get the shield out of the water," said the king with a smile. Harry looked at the king and then down at the shield that was almost covered by the body. The ruby was in the middle and surrounded by ornate, still shimmering diamonds. Harry dipped his hands in the foul-smelling bog's water. He didn't want to touch the body that was beneath the water, but he noticed something. He didn't have to touch the body. In fact, he couldn't. His hand went straight through the decaying elf, and he could clearly feel the stone pulsing and radiating heat. He gripped the stone tightly in his hand and pulled. Despite the stone having been fused to the shield, it came out as easily as if it were just stuck in the mud. "I got it," said Harry. But as he took it in his hand, the flames that hovered around the pool and the spirits residing inside erupted into the air and hovered over them. "Oh dear," said the king. Sirius stood along the deck of the ship, watching the countryside pass him by. He couldn't help but think of his godson. They were now on the straight path to Minas Tirith, where Harry was. He could hardly wait to see and hold his Harry once again. He could remember when Harry came to his family home over the summer. Harry was almost running to him when he saw his godfather and wrapped his thin arms around him. Sirius returned the hug, holding the young boy close to him, breathing in the scent of his beloved godson. It was a mixture of spices, seasonings, earth, and a little sweat. How it didn't dawn on him that he was a cook when he smelled the cooking ingredients. He didn't know. He would remember that scent till the day he died. He looked down at his sword. It wasn't a wand, but it was effective in this world. Thanks to Legolas, he was quickly becoming a decent swordsman. Mediocre, according to a smirking Strider. Though, he still suffered from a lot cuts that his swords did while they sparred, but he was almost able to land a few hits. Something that Legolas said that not many could do unless they were lucky. "We are almost to Minas Tirith, Black. Let's have a few more lessons," said Legolas, taking out his twin blades. "Sure," said Sirius. "I'm not completely diced up yet." Aragorn watched as Legolas and Sirius sparred on the deck. His face was plain. "He's getting better," grumbled Gimli. "He is. Legolas is a good teacher. Seems that Black is more attuned to speed-based attacks," said Aragorn. "He'll need all the skills he can get before we reach our destination." "I wouldn't worry about him. I doubt these undead soldiers will leave even half a battalion to us to defeat. Besides, orcs are not the hardest foe to beat on the field of battle," said Gimli. "They have no warrior training. It's either kill or be killed. It's the bigger foes we need to have him watch out for." "You're right. He'd better not try and take on a troll, or worse," said Aragorn. Then off into the distance they could see the tall white tower of Minas Tirith. "We are almost there." Legolas and Sirius stopped sparring and saw the tower themselves. Strangely, a thought, but it wasn't like a normal thought, it was like a daydream, came to Sirius's mind. He was riding up to a large tower with sword in hand and a shield and the reins of a fiery charger in the other. He then scaled the wall and climbed into the tower through the lone window. Inside was a bed, and his godson lying on the bed, as if he were dead, gossamer curtains shielding him poorly yet gracefully from onlookers. His hands folded peacefully over his stomach, no breath escaping his lungs. He made his way slowly over to the bed, and bent over near his godson's head. What the hell was he thinking? Sirius shook his head and was rewarded with a smack to his side by the flat side of Legolas's blade. "You're not paying attention," said Legolas, pulling his blades back. "I was just thinking." "Never mind," said Sirius. "Just ignore me. Let's get back to what we were doing," said Sirius. "I was doing what we were supposed to be doing. You drifted off," said Legolas, bringing his blade up to strike again. Sirius couldn't figure out where that idea came from. It was just weird, weirder than Gilderoy, Dazzlegums, Lockhart, Merlin. He was a freak. He would never shut up, and he would lie through his teeth and try and pump up his own ego. Not only that, but he swung and batted for both teams, but that wasn't the creepy parts. He liked the younger years, third years and under. He was a real piece of trash. And he and James made it a point to hex the nut job every time they heard he had flirted with someone 3 years under him. He was weirder than anything he could think up. Perhaps the king placed that idea in his head. But why? Was Harry unconscious somewhere? Was it his duty to wake him up? Was he cursed and only he could save him? What did that daydream mean? And did it mean anything? Was he just panicking? Harry dodged the grasp of the spirit's clawed hands and tried to make his way back to the king, who was holding them off with blasts of light that caused whatever spirit it hit to disappear. "Can't we just leave?" asked Harry. "They'll follow us everywhere," said the king, sending a blast of light down to a trio of spirits that were getting too close. "There would be no point in leaving till this becomes resolved." "So you just keep blasting them away," said Harry, standing behind the king. "You can do what I'm doing as well," said King Mendembor as he waved his hand, sending a dozen or so back to the murky depths. "What? I can, but I don't know how," said Harry. "Not that you've shown me how to do much more than float since this little jaunt started. Just think of what you want. You want these spirits to go. So just summon a blast from your fingers and the power will do what you want," said the king. "Experience is the best teacher." "He's in my head again." "How do I get started?" asked Harry. "Take your hand and want," said the king. One malevolent spirit came close to them and Harry threw his hand up, thinking of only keeping this thing away from him. A warm glow erupted from the palm of his hand, and suddenly a red and gold beam of light came from his hand and pierced the spiritual bodies of all that stood in front of him. "Whoa," said Harry as he saw the spirits regroup a few 100 feet away. "Not bad for your first time," said King Mendembor with a smile. "Not bad? You're just shooting one bolt. I'm a whole wall," said Harry with an excited smile. "What's going on? I feel funny," he thought to himself. He couldn't stop himself from sending wave after wave of pure energy towards the creatures before him, as if he was hungry for more power and to see the after effect of his labor. "I'm using pinpoint accuracy, and I'm conserving energy. You're wasting it? See, you're already exhausted," said the king, as he lifted the youth off the ground by his arm. Harry's body gave way, and he began to sink to the ground after sending wave after wave of red and gold energy towards the spirits. "Don't use up your power so quickly. It may be more powerful than most of the stones, but these have bigger limitations than any other power," said King Mendembor. He shook his head when he saw that Harry was completely knocked unconscious. "Now you're powerless, just like before." He slung the ghostly form over his shoulder and continued to blast the remaining specters to peaceful oblivion. "You're stronger when you're flesh and blood, it seems. You're a little power-hungry this way." "Strange," said the king. He didn't notice that despite the body of the boy being almost opalescent, there was a dark blotch inside him, growing larger and more visible. It was like a small black jellyfish, sucking onto his heart. The orcs rested in the ruined city of Osgiliath. It was a long siege and a long day of battling. They had been bombarding the city of Minas Tirith for many days and many nights. They were getting tired, not that their orc captains would let them leave and return to their crude homes. And now, with the newly arrived army of Rohan, they were quickly becoming weary. Not that they would voice that. They were waiting for the ships that would relieve them and bring about the final attack on the greatest city of men. Once the Corsairs were upon the shore, they would strike for the final time and take the city from the men who foolishly opposed them, and in that one fell swoop, Rohan would also fall. Then a scout up in one of the ruined towers spotted the nearing black sails of the Corsair ships come into the harbor, and slowly they pulled into the docks. Finally, "Corsair scum," shouted the captain of the orcs. "We've been waiting for you blasted sea rats," shouted another orc. The ships came to a halt, and beneath the railing of the ship, Sirius could hardly hold in his laughter. "These things are idiots," whispered Sirius with a bright smile. "I can't wait." "Wait for it?" said Aragorn. "Now," he whispered loudly. They jumped over the railing and landed on the stone dock, drawing their weapons. The orcs stood in shock, staring at the two men, elf and dwarf. "Yarg!" shouted Aragorn. Legolas, Gimli, and Sirius, the four of them lunged towards the enemy, and the orcs began to sneer. That is, before the spirits that were on the boat from the White Mountains came out and smothered the orcs and the countless ones behind them. The king carried the unconscious boy as far away from the marsh as he could. The poor lad wasn't waking up, but all he was knocked out. Perhaps getting away from the bog and those fallen warriors would have a positive effect, fresh air and the ever-present chill. He laid the boy down on the rocky ground and made a startling discovery. "What on earth is that?" breathed the king. He nearly fell backwards in shock. The black spot on the lad's chest finally caught his eye. It wasn't there before, but strangely, it had decided to appear in the marshes and grow to an immense size. It was the size of his fist and continued to pulse over the heart of the boy. Small black tendrils etched over the heart of the lad, and it seemed to grow with each passing moment. The king removed one hand from the boy's head and made the same glowing force he had used early surround it. Then he lowered the glowing hand into the boy's transparent chest. He grabbed a hold of the vile black parasite and pulled carefully. The slimy thing was not loosening. It was stubbornly hanging on. He sent his own thumb under the vile thing, taking care not to puncture it, and moved the thumb to peel off the thing carefully. He managed to release the tendrils from the boy's body, but he saw that there were more tendrils coming out of the blob. He had to work quickly. He pulled as hard as he had dared. The thing was gripping where the boy's heart was, and if he pulled too hard, he didn't want to think of the consequences. And if his nail were to puncture it... Finally, the thing loosened, and it came off, twitching horribly in the air. The king looked at it intently. He had never seen anything so twisted, vile, and wretched. This was dark magic. This was the most disgusting enchantment he had ever seen. This had to be... He waved his hand over it slowly, and it became encased in the golden magic that trailed after him everywhere. Harry's eyes fluttered open, and he looked up at the king, with the blackened blotch suspended in the golden mist. He groaned, and rubbed his head, trying hard to sit up. "What?" "This came from you," said the king, holding out the blotch and pushing the boy down gently to the rock beneath him. "What the hell is it?" asked Harry in a whisper. "This is a powerful bit of dark magic. This magic will enable the caster to, in a sense, never die. They slice their soul almost to shreds and fix it to objects, mostly inanimate. It's very rarely attached to a living thing," said the king. Harry's face turned white. "This wretched thing," he gestured towards the foul thing hovering in the mist, "made you a Horcrux." Harry stared at the blotch in the king's hand. That was inside him, and he was a Horcrux? Since the king removed that nasty-looking thing, did that make it so that he wasn't one anyone? What really was a Horcrux? Were there others? Whose Horcrux was he? Was he Voldemort or someone unknown to him that just picked him because he was the boy who lived? "Are you rested enough, lad?" asked the king, waving his hand, and the blotch disappeared. "Where did it go?" asked Harry. "Someone we're safe." "Now answer my question," said the king. "What?" "Oh yeah, I'm rested," said Harry. He still felt tired, but strangely he felt a bit lighter, as if something were taken off his shoulders. "Good, now come along, we'll get the pearl," said the king, as he helped Harry to his feet. "That'll be paramount to the cause, especially if we have to take on that Dark Lord of yours." Harry straightened up and followed the king as they glided towards the city of Minas Tirith. There was a question that was bugging him. He couldn't remember if he had asked it before, but maybe he'd be able to sneak a little more out of the man. "So, how am I supposed to keep a hold of the stones when I wake up?" asked Harry. "Or are you going to hold them for the duration?" "Gandalf currently has the rest of the stones in his care. We will collect them while we get the pearl, and when you awaken, they will be next to you. The only stone you need to worry about is the onyx," said the king. "That one you'll have to get the moment you wake up, so you'll be able to escape." "Where is the stone?" asked Harry. "It's in the drawer beside the bed," said the king. "It shouldn't take you longer than a few minutes to find it." Harry looked at the spirit floating in front of him. He still wasn't telling him everything. He wasn't being upfront about it all, these stones and this world. Come, lad, thinking about my lack of revelations is getting old. Now come up here and think of fresh ideas. This king was going to drive him insane. Anya sat back in the kingdom of Rohan. She had enough excitement to last her a lifetime, and decided to hide out in the Golden Hall until the battle was over. Well, Lord Ymir decided for her. The king, seeing how attached Mary was to her, promised that she could seek refuge there until the battle was over, no matter what the outcome. And with that, Ymir had a few of his men whisk her off to safety. Lord Ymir was quite kind to her. He even gave the men orders to place her in the nicer rooms and to have new clothes made for her. She had to admit, sleeping in a bed and having new garments would be an absolute luxury, as well as some rest. She was still quite shaken up over the whole ordeal, and a pot of freshly made tea wouldn't be amiss. She wanted to go home, but the man seeking Harry, it worried her so much, and she wanted to make sure that he was all right and that he was warned. Mary promised her that he would find him and tell him, but she still was uneasy. What if the madman intercepted the message? Harry would be taken off guard. How would he survive? How is Harry going to beat this madman? He had so much power, so much terrible power. How is Harry going to contest against it? Lady Anya, asked one of the servant girls coming into her room. Anya turned around quickly and saw the maid that seemed to be attached to her hip. She hardly left her side since she arrived, waited on her hand and foot. She wasn't used to being called such a lofty title. She came from the same class as the girl waiting on her. She couldn't help it. It felt sort of nice, if not a little awkward. Yes, stammered Anya. Lunch will be served momentarily. Would you like to follow me? Asked the maid pleasantly. Anya stood up and followed her out of the room that was given to her. She stopped at a window facing east. She hoped Harry was all right and that he was safe. She was grateful that the king had her taken back to Rohan to further her escape from the man that hunted Harry. She was shocked that they knew of the man. She didn't know that they knew them. She had been with him since Bree, and they hadn't been in Rohan. They were too far north for them to be in the land of the Horsemasters. My lady? Asked the maid. I'm coming, said Anya, tearing her eyes away from the window and heading to the dining hall. The servants didn't say anything, but the rumors were already flying that Lord Yaxley held an instant soft spot in his heart for her. She was very lovely and very soft-spoken. Her hair was as golden as Lady Owen's. They all had to admit she would fit right in with the royal family of Rohan. Voldemort snarled as he watched the armies of Sauron pass underneath him as he sat on the side of the cliff. He had lost his horse, annoying beast as it was, and he had lost the girl. Now he had had to travel about the countryside on foot, or that was, until he realized he could levitate a cluster of spears and just stand on them. By standing on them, he managed to fly along the ground and travel at amazing speed. This world just held so many surprises, and it seemed to relish him being here. He couldn't wait to make the people of this world bow to his will. But, speed or not, he was unsure of where to go from this point. No doubt the girl would have made her way south to the city beside the Dark Lord Sauron's realm and warned them about his presence. He couldn't go to Mordor. He didn't have the right amount of power to take on this might. He'd have to collect more weapons, and what place better than a battlefield? He'd wait until the battle was over and collect the fallen steel weapons. Then, once he had an army of weapons behind him, he'd take on Mordor, with lifeless soldiers he couldn't lose. He looked at the orcs marching beneath him. They hadn't noticed him yet, and he wasn't about to alert them to his presence. He would bide his time and allow the rest of this pathetic world enlarge his arsenal. He would wait until this war was over, and then, whoever was the winner, he would face them. He decided to stay up on the cliff. He didn't want to wear himself out traveling from one place to another. He would wait for the war to be over and take on the survivors while they were weak and recovering. Sirius, Strider, Gimli, and Legolas sliced their way to the city of Minas Tirith. Sirius swung his sword like a madman, working furiously to get to the city, where he was sure Harry was. He dodged horses crashing through the ranks, with or without riders, and trampled anyone that got in their way. The waves of specters that rolled over the enemy and their massive Oliphant mounts bombarded the city walls and pooled out of the sides, causing the great city to look like a ghostly green waterfall. Sirius ran as fast as he could to the city doors and stepped through their broken doors. He looked around, trying frantically to find his godson amongst the fleeing people. "Harry!" shouted Sirius. "Harry, where are you?" He was so close, he had to find him. He climbed the spiraling heights of the city. He banged on the doors, shouting out his godson's name, but no one came to the door. He moved on to the next one and the next. No one came out to talk to him. His godson didn't come busting through the door and into his arms. He was quickly losing hope. Was he too late? He banged on another door, and this time a gruff voice inside came to his ears after he called his godson's name. Harry, did you say?" Sirius froze. The door opened and an old man peered at him skeptically. "Who wants to know about the boy?" "I do. Where is he at?" asked Sirius quickly. "And how do I know I can trust you?" said the man, holding a large pitchfork in his hand, ready to thrust it at the frantic-looking man. Please," said Sirius, panting. "I just want Harry to come home." The man looked at him with a calculating gaze and then pointed down to the bottom tier. "Gandalf will tell you where he is." Sirius turned and looked down in the direction He-Man pointed. "I just came from there," muttered Sirius. "Thank you." He turned and ran back down. The old man shook his head. He didn't feel like breaking the news to the man. He wasn't one of those that could break bad news softly. Best leave that job to others. He could handle bread and cakes, but people, they were too complicated for his tastes. Though he could understand the man, he missed the lad something awful as well. He hoped the boy died painlessly. Sirius ran as quickly as his legs and gravity could take him. Now he had to look for this Gandalf person. He had forgotten to ask what this man looked like. Hopefully he could see someone that would take the time to stop running around screaming and point him out. He got down to the main level and looked around. There was no one willing to stop and pause for even a moment. He saw one old man, however, directing the soldiers to and fro, shouting that the spirits were not going to harm them and to return to their posts. He wore long white robes and held in his hand a shimmering sword and had a walking stick in his other. This bloke was in charge. Perhaps he would know where this Gandalf bloke was. "Excuse me?" said Sirius loudly, as he tried to make his way to the white-dressed man. The man turned and looked at him. "Gandalf, look out!" shouted one of the Rohirrim soldiers. Sirius and the old man turned and saw Eomer come out brandishing his sword. "Hey!" shouted Sirius. He threw up his sword and deflected the blade, though it knocked him back. "What are you doing?" "He's after the boy! He wants to kill him!" shouted Eomer, continuing his assault on the dark-haired man. "What? You're crazy!" said Sirius, ducking behind a pillar. "Eomer!" shouted Aragorn's voice. Sirius dodged another blow and held out his sword. "Strider, he's lost his bloody mind," said Sirius as he deflected another blow with his sword. The old man dressed in white raised his staff with both hands and brought it down, causing the ground around the two fighters to shake and cause them to both to fall to their knees. "That's enough," said Gandalf. "Now what is going on?" "He's after the boy. He's been hunting him," said Eomer, getting to his feet and raising his sword. Legolas pulled back on his bow and pointed it towards Eomer's head. "That's enough." "What's going on here?" said Gimli. Said Eomer. "I'm not trying to hurt him. I just want to bring him home. Go and get him. He'll tell you who I am. I would never harm a hair on his head. I would die before I even laid a hand on him," said Sirius, looking to the white-haired man. This had to be Gandalf from what Strider told him. He was a wizard, and that was magic, as he had never seen it before. Though the man looked less than happy at the thought of getting Harry. "What's wrong, Gandalf?" asked Strider, looking at the worn face his old friend had. "Harry, he was captured by Sauron," said Gandalf, looking down at the ground. Shame stretched across his face, and his hand tightening around his staff. Aragorn staggered. "No, all their protective measures, and it all fell apart." Harry floated in silence beside the king as they mad their way slowly to Minas Tirith. But something attracted his gaze out of the corner of his eye. "What's that?" asked Harry, pointing. The king looked over and saw what he was pointing at. "It seems to be a man holding up there," said the king. "A foolish place to rest. The Mordor army walks just beneath there." Harry peered over to the man's figure. There was something familiar about the man's face. He wafted over to where the man was, but when he got close enough, his hand went to his mouth to stifle his scream. "Lad, what is it?" asked the king, coming over quickly. It's Voldemort," said Harry, looking horrified up at the man peering around himself, keeping watch. "Come, lad," said the king, pulling Harry away from where he was staring at the man sitting above them. "We don't have much time." "But," said Harry, "you said he had a stone." "And I told you we can't take his just yet. We need that pearl before we even think of attempting to take his stone," said the king. Harry looked up at the man that had plagued his life and ripped his family from him. They were now in the same world together. Both didn't have their usual magic, and both had at least one stone. Nothing in life was easy. "Come, lad, we cannot waste time here. We need to get that pearl, and then get you back to the tower," said King Meanbor. "There is nothing more important right now than to get the pearl and then get you back in time." Harry kept sending fleeting glimpses back to the man sitting on the rocks above, but the king grabbed a hold of his arm and pulled him along behind him. He knew the urgency, and he appreciated that the king wanted to make sure he survived, but there was Riddle, and Harry was in a corporeal state. Harry could have haunted him or something. "Don't be foolish," said the king. Harry groaned. He wished the king would stay out of his thoughts. How could this have happened, Gandalf? Said Strider, pacing the throne room of Minas Tirith. Aragorn and the rest of the commanders of the armies of Middle-earth stationed themselves in the Thorn Realm of Minas Tirith. Gandalf said that it would show the people that Aragorn had come to claim the throne, and not just aid in its protection. It worked. The people hailed him and sang praises to him as he rode his horse up to the top part of city. Merry and Pippin rode with Gandalf and Éowyn as they climbed and waved to the people good-naturedly, though they were fearful for Harry's safety. But the reason they were coming together to speak at the top of the city was to discuss the final confrontation with Sauron and the kidnapping of Harry Potter. I don't understand it. How could Sauron know about the lad? Said Gimli. I'm not altogether sure on that. The guards told me that he was snatched away by the ringwraiths late in the night. I don't know how they knew he was going to be out and about at night, or who he was, said Gandalf. I've heard stories, Gandalf, that those fell beasts they ride can see in the dark, but how they knew who to pick up in the dark, said Legolas. And those wraiths, one can only guess how they would have been able to see the boy. So, we lost him, said Gimli, shaking his head. That poor lad, he didn't deserve a fate such as that. It is just as well that man would have killed him on sight, I shouldn't wonder. He would have been killed either way, said Éomer. He wouldn't have left this city alive. Gandalf looked at Éomer firmly, then he turned to the golden-haired Shide maiden. Éowyn, you said a young girl came to your camp and said someone was hunting for Harry. Do you remember how she described him? The girl said he was tall, dark, and quite good-looking. But he had a wild and mad look in his eyes whenever he spoke of Harry, said Éowyn. She had a terrible ordeal. It was too much for a young thing like her, said Éomer. A small flash of tenderness came to his eye. Though she's an amazing girl to escape the way she did. I cannot believe that Black is the man she spoke of, said Éowyn, shaking her head. He spoke so gently about Harry. Of course it must be. There is no one else searching for the boy, said Éomer. He fits the description. When Black speaks of the boy, he doesn't have a mad look in his eyes, said Aragorn. Aye, that he doesn't, said Gimli. There's another emotion there. There is love, devotion, and anguish, but not madness, said Legolas. She said that she had just left the man behind before she came to you. He was with us to the south. She came from the north. Éomer didn't look convinced, but Strider was. Where did you put him? Strider asked one of the guard. I placed him one of the anterooms, my lord, said the guard. We didn't imprison him, as per your orders. He is agitated. He's tried to leave the room several times. He says he needs to find a cub or something along those lines. That must be a term of endearment for the boy, said Gandalf. You don't call someone you desire to kill a name that sounds endearing. I'll vouch for the man, said Gimli. If he's false, I'll cleave his neck personally. Bring him back in here, said Aragorn. Be gentle, he's not your enemy. The guard turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind an irate Éomer. We should show caution to this man. He could be the one hunting the boy, hissed Éomer. I don't believe this man would cause Harry any harm, said Gandalf. He did not appear to have any malice towards the boy that I could sense. Of course not, said Sirius, coming out of the room. I love Harry. I'd never harm a hair on his head. Sirius looked pissed. He had heard a little bit of the conversation, and it set his teeth on edge. He had enough of hearing of people say that Harry's life was in danger every day that he was free and on the run. He had heard it when he was on the run the first time, before he made it to Hogwarts, everyone muttering how they hoped Harry would stay safe and away from him. Those stupid people never realized that he also wanted Harry safe. That it made him sick to his very soul. The thought of even Harry having a cut on his finger, let alone seriously injured. We know Black, but what that girl said Aragorn. I can guess who you're talking about, but in my world, he's far from handsome, said Sirius. He's called Voldemort. He's our version of this Sauron guy you have. He's here, said Legolas. You know of him? Said Sirius in a shocked tone. The boy told us about him. It was not the most pleasant story I had ever heard, said Gandalf. Well, he should know all about him, and I've known him longer than he had. Voldemort had been missing in our world for a while. Turns out he was here the entire time, said Sirius. And he won't rest until he kills Harry. And he won't stop there. Harry spoke of him, said Gandalf softly. When will he stop? Asked Pippin nervously. When he takes over, and after he's seen this world, he'll probably want to come back, said Sirius. If Sauron wins, he won't be able to contend against him. Sauron will defeat him easily, said Éomer. As long as he can't use magic, he'll be about as weak as, said Sirius. You, said Strider with a smirk. So much for the truce, muttered Sirius. Silence trickled over them until Sirius spoke once more. So how are we going to save him? Asked Sirius with a pleading tone in his voice. Gandalf, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas looked at each other. Gandalf turned back to Sirius. "We cannot save him." On the fields below Minas Tirith, Harry and the king had arrived. What happened to the battle? Is it over? Did we lose? Asked Harry as he and the king floated over the fields littered with weapons and the burning bodies of orcs, trolls, and oliphants. "It seems that they won against all odds," said the king with a warm smile. "That's good. I was becoming a little concerned for these people. It pains me that I cannot do a thing to help them, though it does hurt my pride that they don't need me." "That's crazy. The army wouldn't stop coming." "How did we win?" asked Harry. "We should have been overrun." "I can't even begin to fathom unless, well, he would have been able to," said the king. "What?" asked Harry curiously. "Who would have been able to do what?" "Your friend, Strider, would have had to remake an alliance with a long-dead race of men," said the king. Great, the king was talking in riddles again. Harry didn't bother to ask what he meant by it, but pulled ahead of him to get to the city faster. "Ease up, lad. Don't tire yourself out. We have a lot of searching to do, and not a lot of time to do it in," said the king. "We must find that pearl and get back to the tower." The king and Harry inspected every tier in turn as they climbed the city of Minas Tirith. Harry couldn't hear the music, and the king couldn't see where it could be. The city was bustling with people on their errands and to their jobs of refortifying the city and making repairs to the towers that stuck up in random into the sky. There were families that were trying to collect their children from their hiding places, then locating their husbands from wherever they were stationed or placed to aid in the defense of the city. There were carts that once held fruits of a farmer's labor and sweat were overturned, and the contents were tossed onto the ground and smashed by the feet of population of the panicked city. They climbed and climbed until they reached the level where the baker's sister's house had been. "Wonder if she's all right," said Harry. He slipped through the stone wall, and a horrifying sight met his eyes. The entire room was destroyed. Slash marks were made all over the place, and every piece of crockery she had was broken and smashed to pieces. He thought the woman had to be dead, laying dead somewhere underneath all this mess. But her voice came piercing through the carnage. "I want this place cleaned up," she screeched loudly. 2 guards came into the room hurriedly. "Ma'am, we're sorry. We didn't mean to take refuge in your house. I don't care what your intentions were. You brought those things into this house, and I won't stand for it. There's a king now, and if you don't fix it, I'll complain to him. My brother-in-law knows Gandalf personally," she said, waving her stick in the air. "He'll tell the king, and you'll both be strung out for the crows." "Nice woman," said the king with a snicker. "She was pleasant to me," said Harry, looking at her with a smile. "You have a charming face," said the king. "Old ladies are swayed by a charming face." Harry shook his head, his non-corporeal face turning a faint pink. "When you go up to the top, stop at the baker's, tell my brother I'm out of bread, and be sure to send that handsome young delivery boy. I want to make sure he survived all this," said the woman. A shy smile played on her lips for a moment. "The baker's assistant?" said one of the guards. He looked at his confederate. "Ma'am, the baker's assistant was killed days ago. Nazgul took him in the night. He was riding up to the baker's," said the guard, his voice somber. The woman stared at 2 guards. Harry's heart went out to her. She looked devastated, but why he couldn't understand why. The guards solemnly promised to fix her things or replace them, and then she sank into her chair and covered her mouth with a handkerchief. "Come along, lad. You can't help her. You'll have the ability to see her once it's all over. I think she'll be very happy to see you," said the king, with a soft smile. Harry followed the king, and they continued their search. They continued their way up to the citadel. Harry stopped in at the baker's and watched as the old man struggled under a tray of loaves. "He needs someone to help him," said Harry. "The people are trying to put their city back together. No one has any free time to help him," said the king. "He gives them their bread, their food. They should help him first," said Harry shortly. "His place is not damaged. He was too high up to get most of the carnage. That is the blessing this city has. As long as there is wheat and other ingredients, there won't be a shortage of bread for the people," said the king. They continued upward, not willing to spend any more time on anything else. They had to find the pearl quickly, but they weren't having the best luck. Until they were on the top of the citadel, then the king pointed higher up into the sky. There, on the tallest part of the mountain behind the city, there was a large tower with a ladder climbing up the side. Harry could make out a tall pile of wood. "There, we've searched everywhere else. We'll check the signal fire tower," said the king. "Signal fire tower?" said Harry. "Well, it's the best name for it, in my opinion. It's a tower that when in times of trouble and the city needs to call for aid from Rohan, the pyre is lit, and then a watchtower sees the fire alight, lights their own, and it continues on until it reaches Rohan. Rohan sees it, and then they come, said Harry. Did you see all the hoof prints and the horses all over the place? Rohan came, said the king with a smile. They can choose to come or not. I've never known at any time that Rohan refused to come. Gondor has even come to aid them a time or two. They could have used some help, both of them, said Harry. And help came. Rohan reforged an old alliance, then Gondor sent for help, and another alliance was remade, said the king with a smile. Now, let's get up there. We've gawked enough today. They slowly hovered up to the top of the signal fire tower. They circled the tower, inspecting the stone and seeing if the pearl was lodged in the aged tower. See anything over there? Asked King Medinbor. Not a thing. Maybe it's higher. Hang on. Here it is, said Harry excitedly. Planted in the stone was a small white orb, untouched by human hands and the hands of time. It was almost at the top of the tower, and it was almost passed by, except the sunlight reflected off its smooth surface and glinted in the corner of Harry's eyes. How are we going to get this out? Asked Harry. It looks locked and tight. Well, you can slip through walls, and you remember how you got the ruby out, don't you? Said the king with a smile. Harry looked at the ghostly king, then looked over at Pearl. He placed his hand carefully over the stone and pulled his hand back slowly. The pearl came out slowly, but soon he felt the round pearl in the palm of his hand. Harry held it in his hand, the pearl, and if he tallied up all the other stones, that meant he had all but 3. From what the king said, Voldemort had 1, and there was 1 in the tower where his body was, but where was the other stone? There now. Now we just have to get you back to the tower. And, said the king. Wait, is that? That's Sirius, said Harry, looking down and seeing the form of his godfather as they fell slowly back to the citadel courtyard. The king watched as his ghostly ward made a beeline for the man. Just when I thought I had seen it all, he survives this world, he said with a smile. Harry fell to the stone walkway and ran to his godfather. He could hardly dare believe it. Sirius was here. So this was who the king sent to fetch him. What do you mean we can't save him? Said Sirius, chasing after Gandalf. Harry had to float in order to keep up with the irate man. He's in Mordor and in the clutches of Sauron. For all we know, he's gone. Gone? No, he can't be gone. I would know if he was gone, said Sirius fiercely. I'm right here, Sirius, said Harry. He can't hear you, said the king softly. Come along, let's get you back to the tower. If these people plan a march of Mordor, I fear it will be the climax of his reign of terror. I want to, said Harry. Lad, if we can get you back to the tower and get you prepared to wake up at the right time, then you'll be able to spend all the time in the world with him, said the king with urgency. Now come along, it'll take time to get to the tower, especially with Sauron's defenses so heightened. Don't we need the stones? Asked Harry. Don't we need the others? I thought I needed all the stones together to apparate with the onyx stone. Only if you wish to return to your world here. A royal command is all it takes, said the king. Besides, the further the other stones are from Sauron, the better. Harry watched as King Medinbor took the stone's pouch off Gandalf's hip, becoming as ghost-like as himself. We will take these, but the last 2 will be saved for last. Harry gave Sirius one last look and followed the king out onto Pelennor Field. Harry followed the king back to the Black Land of Mordor. He noticed that the king looked nervous about something and kept looking behind them to see if anyone was following them. What's wrong? Asked Harry. We need to get back to the tower. If what I think is going to happen before we get there, then I don't want to think of the alternative, said the king swiftly. The alternative was possibly the death of his young protege and replacement. The death of a child left a bad taste in any sane man's mouth, but a boy that he had grown to be incredibly fond of, it was terrifying. He reared back and grabbed Harry's hand, pulling him along with him. It was hours later, resting periodically to gain their strength back, when they managed to reach the Black Gate of Mordor. But a giant wall of fire was in their way. The fire wasn't really there, but it alerted them to the gaze of the giant, lidless eye hovering over the Black Tower. The Eye of Sauron was gazing fiercely between the city of Gondor and its front gates, waiting for the foolish men of Gondor to challenge him. The king looked worriedly at the gazing eye as it made its swift monitoring of its border. Can't we just go through the rock? Asked Harry. It'd be a hell of a lot faster. We wouldn't be able to see where the eye is looking once we come out. We need to keep out of its gaze. What would happen if he did see us? Asked Harry. Those specters at the marsh, you'd be reduced to something like that, said the king absently. How would he catch us? Asked Harry. He then looked over at the flames licking the ground. If we step in fire, I take it? Precisely. Thankfully. King Miandimbor looked off into the cliffside beside the Black Gate. There is another way. I hope I remember that path. We don't have the time, but we don't have much choice. What way is that? Asked Harry. It's a cave entrance to my realm. It was lovely all those years ago. The walls glistened with precious stones and crystals, though I don't think that Sauron has kept up with its upkeep, said the king. Come, we need to hurry. The king pulled Harry off in a different direction, away from the Black Gate of Mordor. Rush, 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 thought Harry with a slight smirk. So much for sightseeing. You may sightsee at another time, said the king. Get out of my head, said Harry, mumbling. In the Malfoy Manor, Lucius paced in front of the fireplace. There was still no word on the location of Lord Voldemort, but it was no matter. There was no one who could defeat their master, and if he had been wounded in any way, they would all have been summoned. Lucius, however, had his master's orders to fulfill. The Dark Lord wanted the Potter boy captured, and captured he would be. Hopefully, Dumbledore was putting up a powerful defense around the school, and with the arrival of his cousin, Leroy, and his husband, the school was now untouchable. The fool. He should have stayed down in Africa, where he and his damned male lover belonged. Lucius could never understand that side of the family, and how they could never truly understand the grand and noble work he was trying to further and aid. Especially not his younger cousin Leroy. He had broken his father's heart and bedded down with a man from a known muggle-loving family to boot. He tossed aside the chance to marry Bellatrix for someone else, though he couldn't quite find fault with him on that. True, Bella was a beauty years ago, but once she became enraptured with the Dark Lord, she whored herself to him. He never bedded with her that he knew of, but she always yearned to touch him and tried to please him as best she could, and as best as he allowed her to do. He jabbed at the fire. They had to find the boy. If they didn't by the time he came back, there would be nothing to quell the Dark Lord's anger at the death of Bella. They couldn't lie and say she died in battle. He was no fool and was a master at seeing through their best lies. Narcissia came into the room, with Draco walking slowly behind her. They were both wearing bathrobes and had obviously been awakened by Lucius's mutterings and continuous pacing. They looked at Lucius with concern. Dear, are you all right? Asked Narcissia worriedly. You haven't slept in days. I'll be all right once we have Potter's body here, said Lucius shortly. Once we can surrender the boy, and once Voldemort finally has his revenge, then everything will move ahead with his plan. The boy's death will signal the rebuilding of Voldemort's reign. Draco looked sideways uncomfortably. But Dumbledore has put up strong defenses. None of our kind can even get to the village, let alone the castle, said Narcissia. And he wasn't at the Weasley's house. We looked everywhere Potter has been. We haven't looked at Potter's ancestral home, said Lucius quickly. I've managed to stay in the social circles despite all this, and I haven't heard of Potter being there, said Narcissia. They would keep it quiet, said Lucius. Not Angora and her sisters, remember. They also said that James and Lily Potter were going into hiding. Before Pettigrew told us, said Narcissia. If the young heir to the Potter patriarch was at Paradise Castle, I would have heard it. Father, maybe Potter is at Hogwarts. You could always send me back, and I can see if Potter is hidden in one of the towers or something, said Draco hopefully. It might not be a bad idea. Dumbledore may stop us, but he won't stop Draco from coming back to school, said Narcissia. Dumbledore knows we support the Dark Lord. He won't let Draco back into the castle, especially if Potter's body is there, said Lucius. Go back to bed, Draco. Your help isn't needed this time. Draco looked hurt, but walked swiftly to bed. He looked at his wife, and then a thought struck him. Narcissia, didn't you say that your family house couldn't be plotted on a map? Grimmauld Place? That's right, said Narcissia. Doesn't Sirius Black have the only right to that house? Said Lucius with a sneer. Harry and the king reached the stone steps that would lead them to the secret entrance to Mordor. There was no one about, but Harry stared transfixed at the greenish glow of the tower that stood in front of them. There's no one here, we could just go through, said Harry. Besides, they can't see us anyway. I'm not risking it, and neither are you, said the king, pulling Harry by the hand. Up the stairs with you. But, said Harry. Lad, we don't have time, repeated the king. Least of all time to argue between ourselves. Harry took the lead and floated up the crumbling stairs. What is this pathway for? Not really secret, if you can see the stairs, said Harry. It's secret enough, no one has the time or leg strength to get up these stairs, said the king. Back when I was alive, this was a beautiful countryside, and once you got high enough, it would show a lovely landscape. So, it's a scenic route, said Harry. Precisely, I love nature and its grand beauty. I think it's a final stab at my memory that Sauron has completely destroyed everything I worked so hard to perfect, said the king. They turned to see the black earth and the continuous phosphorus-like glow of the large structure beneath them. Crows flapped beneath them and squawked loudly, bickering amongst themselves. "My world, my utopia, destroyed." "Can it be fixed?" asked Harry. "Oh, it will take an immense amount of work, and the time it will take to purify the air alone will be long indeed. I fear it will not be in your lifetime that this world will become its lush paradise again," said the king solemnly. "To be honest, this world could be labeled as too much trouble for its worth, but it's all up to you if it is or not." Harry looked at the king and then back down at the blackened earth. "We've rested enough, it's time to press on," said the king, and he led the youth into the dank, dark cave that stood behind them. "It doesn't look like it could be much of a scenic route," said Harry, looking at the cobwebs that lined the edges of the cave a little ways in. "It didn't always look like this," said the king with a sad smile. They traveled down the winding, dank, dark, sticky caves. There were several paths that veered off where they were traveling. Twice they had to double back. The king's memory of this cave system was slightly lacking, and they found themselves at dead ends. "Here we are. This is the way," said the king with a smile. "It's Moria all over again," groaned Harry. Now, give me some credit. I haven't been down this path since I've died," said the king. The paths began to be drenched in spider webs as they continued down the path. Spiders skittered across the ground and on the walls. If they had been walking and solid, no doubt they would have been covered in the 8-legged creatures. "Ron would be having a fit in this place," said Harry, as he watched several exceptionally large spiders come down on thin lines. They were the size of his head and looked strong enough to take on Crookshanks, and he didn't think Hermione's cat would win that fight. "Look at the size of that one," said the king with a gasp. Harry looked around and saw the curled legs of a gigantic spider. It was a little smaller than what Aragog was, but no less frightening. There was a wound on its belly, and a sticky trail of something went down its side and onto the ground, leave a dried puddle mark. "Something killed it," said the king. "You said that this is a secret way into Mordor. Perhaps Sam and Frodo," said Harry. "It would be the safer way into Mordor, but I can't quite picture them killing it," said the king. "Hobbits are known to be gentlefolk. This is a bit out of character for them." "You don't know, Sam," said Harry with a laugh as they floated swiftly past the fallen creature. They exited the cavern and saw a tower up a further set of stairs. Harry made to go up the stairs, but the king stopped him. He pointed towards another path that led down into the valley. "We need to go there. The tower is this way," said the king. "Going there would be time-consuming and pointless." They made the trip to the tower. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. The orcs and Easterlings were all congregated by the Black Gate, and the eye was fixed solely on it. "Just as I thought," said the king. "What?" asked Harry. "Aragorn has come to the Black Gate. He's going to challenge Sauron." "He can't. Sauron is too powerful. And," said Harry, "I think he's trying to give Frodo and Sam time to get to the center of Mount Doom," said the king. "It would make sense, taking Sauron's focus off finding the ring and tending to the bold army attempting to remove him from power." "Do you think it would wise to take the Onyx Stone now?" asked Harry. "We'll find out when we get you back up there," said the king. They flew up to the window where their spectral journey started and stepped into the room. Harry stared at his own lifeless body, resting peacefully just where he left it. "This is no less creepy. Now where is that stone?" asked Harry. Suddenly, a great crack ripped through the sky and caused the mighty tower to sway slightly. "What the bloody hell was that?" yelled Harry. "The ring. Quick, boy, get to your body." "It seems we just made it in time," yelled the king. Harry leaped over to his body and settled back into his skin and bones. His body began to groan and his eyes fluttered. Just as he began to move his fingers, the tower began to lean even further, poised to collapse to the ground, taking them with it. "Hurry," said the king. "You need to get out of here." Harry's entire body ached. He couldn't control anything his limbs did. He tried to move as fast as he could, but his arms and legs were sluggish. The king placed the stones they had collected into the boys' pockets and pointed to the bedside table. "The stone! Get the stone!" said the king hurriedly. Harry raised his arm and slowly reached into the drawer. The tower now cracked in half and began its descent. Remus sat in the room where Harry's body slept, calmly sipping a cup of wine and reading a book. He had become agitated from the lack of knowledge where his best friend was at, but the wine was easing the tension in his body. Suddenly, a pounding noise came from the hall and the door burst open. The kids all came into the room. "Remus, it's the Death Eaters. They're right outside," said Ron. "They're trying to come in," said Hermione. Remus stood up quickly. His wand was out of his hand, and Hagrid picked up his flowery umbrella. Then a flash of gold and red burst forth from the hallway, and a small note floated into the room and landed on the bed, directly over Harry's heart. "Stay with Harry, send the children back to school. I'll be there with Rudolph and Leroy soon." "They're back?" asked Remus. "Isn't Rudolphus a Death Eater?" asked George, his face white and his twin matching it shade for shade. "That says Rudolph, but who are they?" asked Hermione. "Never mind that, go with Mrs. Weasley," said Remus, ushering the children to the with who came to the room. "We can't leave you guys behind," said Fred. "We'll be fine. They can't get in without Dumbledore's permission, but it's too dangerous to move Harry. Now get going. The last thing we need is to protect you kids as well," said Remus. "We can," said Fred. "Now you've heard Remus. Get out of here," said Hagrid roughly. "We'll take care of Harry." The kids were taken out of the room, and from upstairs the two half-breeds could hear the telltale whoosh of flow travel. "Dumbledore should get here soon. He'll send them away, but once he does, they'll figure out that he's here," said Remus. "That's all right. We can find another place to hide him," said Hagrid hopefully, as he pulled the covers closer to Harry's chin. "Don't you worry, Harry. We won't let no one hurt you. I'll set up some protective spells in the front hall. They won't be able to get past it," said Remus. "Dumbledore said to stay in here," said Hagrid sternly. "Gotta follow his orders. They won't make it in." Remus turned to look at Hagrid, but when he saw Harry, he faltered. "All right, but I'll just make some protective spells on the door." He took out his wand, stepped out into the hall, and placed multiple spells on the wood and the knob. Now all they could do was sit and wait for either Dumbledore to come, or for the Death Eaters to finally break through the Fidelius charm. Lucius sneered to himself. They knew they had Potter. The proof was the house that was not making itself known to them. Narcissia did what she was supposed to make the house show itself to a member of the family, but it wasn't revealing itself. Harry Potter had to be here. Now it was just a matter of time to find a way into the house. They tried using a few Muggle hostages, but leave it to Dumbledore to place protective spells all over the area of Grimmauld Place, protecting the other houses and its inhabitants. They would not be able to harm anyone here. They were all focused on the space between number 11 and 13, that they didn't see the three figures come rushing up behind them waving their wands. Merry and Pippin watched in horror as both the Black Tower and the Mountain of Doom both erupted and fell to ruin. The mountain roared and caused the sky to burn red, with lava bursting forth from the summit. They knew that Sam and Frodo were in the mountain, and had just destroyed the ring, and hopefully were trying to escape. And if what Gandalf said was true, Harry was trapped in the Black Tower. His current status unknown, watching both of the landmarks fall, was as if they were watching their three friends die right before their eyes. "Sam! Frodo! Harry!" Sirius fell to his knees in shock. He had lost his godson, after coming so close. This was wrong, so wrong. It wasn't fair. He worked so hard to get here, to see Harry again, alive, happy, and awake. Now he'll never hear his voice again. Never hear the laughter of his godson from one of Fred and George's pranks. Never hold him again, who had it out for him. Why did whatever deity that carved out Harry's path hate the boy so much that he'd do this? "I'm sorry," said Gandalf, touching the man's back sympathetically, and his eyes holding back tears for the three young ones that were lost. "I'm so sorry. If I ever get my hands on Voldemort, I'm going to kill him with my bare hands," said Sirius, tears flowing freely from his eyes. "I can't wait," came a voice from above them. They turned and saw a lone figure standing on top of the cliff, looking down at them. It was Voldemort, a manic look in his eyes and a twisted smile on his lips. He had his hands resting on his knees and seemed to be waiting for them. "That's the man that Anya described," said Mary, "when she told us about the man that kidnapped her." Sirius looked up at the Dark Lord Voldemort and then over to Eomer. "Seriously, you got me mixed up with that," said Sirius with a shout. Eomer looked away slightly. "You do have similarities." "I'm insulted," said Sirius with a disgusted look towards Eomer and a wrathful glare at the Dark Lord. "As am I, but I must say, I'm beginning to prefer this younger body," said Voldemort, flexing his fingers languidly. "I have the knowledge that I sacrificed my appearance for, and now my vitality is back. I can't wait to face Dumbledore again, to see him struggle against me." Sirius looked up at the man, teeth bared wolfishly. "So, Potter's finally dead. Too bad. I'll have to find his body back in my world, especially if I want to harvest those beautiful eyes," said Voldemort silkily. Sirius's fist clenched tightly, leaving deep and bleeding marks in his palm. Strider unsheathed his sword. It wasn't just the eyes I wanted, said Voldemort, knowing that he was causing the ones that knew the boy great pain. I want that heart. I'll petrify it, and it'll make a fine knick-knack. You son of a bitch, shouted Sirius as he whipped his sword out. With a flick of his wrist, the weapons that were held by every warrior far below were lifted out of their grasp and hovering in midair, pointing menacingly towards their owners. What's going on? Said Merry as he stared at the floating weapons. His own short blade within a foot of his skull. Get behind me, said Gandalf, pulling Merry and Pippin back behind him, his staff in his hand, ready to defend himself and the hobbits. I think the odds are stacked in my favor, said Voldemort with a sneer. Now, I'd love to continue playing, but I've got a carcass to find. Please give Potter my best. You bastard, said Sirius through gritted teeth. Voldemort laughed maniacally and pulled the weapons back. I do hope that Potter welcomes the company. He waved his hand, and the weapons began to shoot towards their owners. Gandalf was eye to eye with Glamdring. Aragorn was staring at the steel of his Anduril. Gimli was gawking at his axes. Legolas was dumbfounded as his arrows and his twin knives hovered over his eyes. Sirius was glaring at the man above him. He was going to die. Well, he'd live a good life, minus the 12 lousy years in Azkaban, the awful childhood, lousy summers at home. Well, his school life was great, the time he spent with Lily and James and Remus, holding Harry in the hands, then seeing how he changed into a fine, kind young man. So, all in all, he had a good 6 years at best. He'd be with Harry again, that's all he wanted. They'd both be able to see James and Lily again. He closed his eyes and prepared to say goodbye to his life. Lucius was gripped in the large vines of an enormous plant that was dragging him slowly towards a large Venus flytrap's mouth. How did he get this way? Was this a trap the whole time? Were they just waiting to catch them all in one fell swoop? His wife and a few of the Death Eaters were on the ground, tied up by threads that came from Dumbledore's wand. They had given up. To spare a death by these carnivorous plants. He was the last captured. What was he going to do? Cousin Lucius, you were never this stupid before. Give up, called Leroy. Lucius strained against the tendrils. No, if the Dark Lord finds out I failed, I'd be better off dead. Think of your son, you idiot, shouted Leroy. He needs a father. Lucius looked up at the sky. A father? Could he honestly say that he had been a father to his son? No. He couldn't quite call himself a father, but it was too late. He was dead either way. If this plant didn't kill him, the Dark Lord surely will. Lucius, screamed his wife from below. His eyes looked over to the mouth of the carnivorous plant. It was terrifyingly close. He could smell the sickening sweet nectar that oozed from deep within the flora. This, was it? He steeled himself for the end. Sirius kept his eyes closed. He didn't want to open them. Then the sound around them went completely away, as if something had sucked all the noise the planet had to offer. He didn't feel anything penetrate his body, so he cracked his eyes open slightly. The weapons were still in front of them, but there was some sort of shiny film in front of them, like a giant bubble, and it was keeping the weapons away from them. Sirius looked up at Voldemort and saw to his surprise that the sneering smile was gone and was now replaced with a look of fury, raw, undiluted fury. He looked over to where the Dark Lord was staring at, and what he saw brought tears to his eyes. It was a young man, hair fluttering in the light breeze, a regal robe around his shoulders, black leather boots, white silk shirt with a rising sun embroidered in rich red and gold thread and a crown adorning his head. There were different stones in the metal which varied from silver to gold as if it were swirled around in the forge before it was poured. Light positioned itself on the tips of the crown, giving it an ethereal glow. He had his hand up as if halting the weapons in midair. There were two figures huddled behind him, staring up at him in awe. They were both filthy and drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Harry? Said Sirius weakly. Frodo. Sam, shouted Merry and Pippin. Harry turned his head slightly to where Sirius stood. Then he looked at the others. Keep back, he said in a strangely commanding voice. I've waited a long time for this. So the cowardly boy shows himself at last, said Voldemort smoothly as he stood up slowly. Oh, please, I heard what you said, said Harry with a smirk. You think you can beat me. A change of clothes means nothing, said Voldemort, spitting angrily. You're right. A change of clothes doesn't mean anything, unless something you're wearing makes some difference, said Harry with a smile. Voldemort looked at Crown, with its multiple jewels. Then he tightened the grip on his jade stone. So, you have some special stones as well. No matter, I doubt you'll be able to stop all these weapons forever, snarled Voldemort. Oh, forever is too long to just sit here and wait. I'd get bored after 10 minutes. I plan on wrapping this years-long drama over and done with in the matter of a few minutes, said Harry with a sneer. Voldemort blinked. Where did this brat get the bravado from? He was a cringing child the last time I had trapped him. Something aside from the stones happened. No matter, I'll win this and take all the stones he has and those eyes and heart of his. How about we take this battle in there? Said Harry with a smile as he pointed behind him, the raging wasteland of Mordor, away from any possible hiding spot I may take refuge in. Do you think I'm a fool? But yes, I'll accept your last request, said Voldemort with a smirk as he slid down the side of the cliff. Harry's going to attack him the moment he hits the ground, said Pippin. But Harry didn't attack him. He extended his hand to allow Voldemort to go ahead of him. Oh, after you, said Voldemort with a sly smile. Really? You'd think I'd fall for that? Said Harry with a raised brow. Just gauging how far your stupidity reaches, said Voldemort, shrugging as he led the way to the Black Land of Mordor. Everyone stay here. I'll bring your weapons back if you're that concerned, said Harry, choosing not to look at any of them. Aragorn reached forward to grasp the young man's shoulder, but the film that kept them safe against Voldemort's attacks stopped him. He was on the other side. He'll be all right, won't he? Said Merry. I surely hope so, said Gandalf, gripping his staff tightly. Frodo and Sam turned to face the speaker, and when they saw who it was, their eyes welled up with tears. Gandalf, screamed Frodo as he flung himself to Gandalf's ankles. How did you survive the fall, Mr. Gandalf? Said Sam, sinking wearily to his knees. I suppose I have the time now. We are unable to leave this protective shield until Harry returns, said Gandalf as he placed a hand on the surface of the shiny film that separated them from the rest of the world. What if he loses? Asked Pippin nervously. Then we're no worse off than we were a few moments ago, said Eomer. Legolas turned to look at the man that had said naught but one word since the youth's return. He was staring into space in utter shock. Harry, what? Said Sirius weakly. He was on his knees, his entire body slack. What do we do now, your highness? Asked one of the Gondorian guards. Aragorn looked at the back of the young man they had given up for dead. Walk away from him again. We wait, said Aragorn. We cannot do anything else. Then let's rest and get our strength up. We'll need it if the boy fails, said Eomer. You don't seem to have faith in the lad, said Gimli. He got himself kidnapped by the Dark Lord by being foolish. I doubt he has improved, said Eomer. He saved your kingdom, didn't he? Asked Pippin shortly. Eomer turned away from the hobbit. I'm betting he's jealous. He's in love with Anya, said Merry with a smile. That's the reason he's acting like this. Anya's here? Asked Sam. She's back in Rohan, said Merry, smiling towards Sam and rushing over to the pair of long-lost hobbits. Merry and Pippin were so overjoyed that their friends were back with them that they nearly piled on top of Sam and Frodo. Sam nearly threw them off Frodo when he winced and held his hand closer to his body. How did you two get back here? Asked Merry, shoving Pippin off his legs. Harry brought us back, said Sam. One moment, we were running for our lives away from the mountain's lava, and the next Harry was standing in front of us, wearing that strange outfit and waiting for us. He had his arms out to catch us as he ran down the slope, and the moment we touched him, we arrived here. How did he do that? Asked Faramir. And what was that strange garb he was wearing? Gandalf reached into his pockets but found nothing. His eyes widened. He had a theory, and now it was true. Harry was now the new king. Voldemort turned around, facing the young man that had plagued his life for years. This more confident boy aggravated him to no end, the fluttering cape that seemed to shout nobility, the leather boots that sparkled as if a servant used powdered diamonds in the polish, the crown upon his head, and that knowing smile, it made him want to slaughter the boy all the more. Shall we start then? Asked Voldemort, pulling back his hands, the weapons pulling back as well. Tell me something, Tom, said Harry. Voldemort's eye twitched. Have you learned anything while you were here? Said Harry. I learned I want to take over this land, and with that blasted eye gone, it's going to be amazingly simple, said Voldemort, gesturing to the decimated landscape. Harry looked around them. That's it. You didn't learn anything here at all. What did you learn? Said Voldemort. Harry smiled. I learned that this place can go along very well without us. We're not needed here. Someone like, well, me is wanted, it seems, but they're a bit sick and tired of people like you, said Harry. I don't care what they like, said Voldemort with a snarl. You and I both got a second shot at life, starting over, without magic, and you still can't let it go, said Harry, shaking his head. And you couldn't, spat Voldemort. Oh, I wanted to get home, and I wasn't wasting much time in the process, but I still wanted to enjoy this place. It's a nice world. Too bad you can't seem to realize that. Enough with the chatter. Let's end this, said Voldemort. Don't you want to even, said Harry. Enough, screamed Voldemort as he flung the weapons to his enemy. The swords, spears, axes, and arrows flew towards Harry, prepared to impale him. I don't think this place agrees with you. You were a lot smarter back home, said Harry with a rueful smile. As the people stayed behind on the other side of the great black gate of Mordor, Harry dodged a barrage of spears nimbly as they rained down upon him. Voldemort was causing them to rise into the air and fall down upon the black-haired youth like terrible bolts of destruction. Why won't you stay still? Growled Voldemort as he continued to miss again and again. You talked big, and now you can just barely escape me. Harry continued to dodge the weapons further into the land of Mordor. He wasn't running from the madman, he was drawing Voldemort further and further away from the edge of Mordor. He had a plan, and with the Dark Lord's help, it would be easier to accomplish it. Not that the Dark Lord would be aware of his participation. As he led Voldemort further into the land of Mordor, fresh green grass began to grow as they made their way, discarding the burnt ground and turning it into a lush grassland. Harry was wielding the Emerald Stone to bring the flora back to Mordor, and with Voldemort's help at attacking the ground and pulling the weapons back up into the air, he was aerating the earth around them. The plants would use the Dark Lord's help in growing faster and stronger naturally, helping rebuild King Miandambor's paradise faster than it would have without the Jade Stone. Soon, the lava that once was cascading down the side of Mount Doom was coming up quickly behind them. Harry noticed this out of the corner of his eye, and the feeling of intense heat upon his back, leapt aside onto a thicker piece of rock, and focused his thoughts on an additional stone, the topaz. Won't be long now, Potter, and you'll be with your dear mudblood mother once again, sneered Voldemort. Harry ignored the jab. He would be getting his comeuppance soon enough, just as soon as he was finished with the first thing on the agenda. With the help of the topaz stone, the burning lava cooled underneath his feet, and the same sensation crept up the side of the mountain, causing an end to the fiery rage. All the while, more and more plants, bushes, trees, flowers, grasses began to blossom and burst forth from the ground. What are you doing? Fight me, shouted Voldemort. I'm getting there, said Harry with a sly smile. Voldemort yelled with rage and began to hurl the swords and spears even more ferociously at his retreating foe. He didn't notice that the crown upon the boy's head flashed a purple and blue shade. As Voldemort pelted the annoying pest in front of him with all the weapons he had at his disposal, a downpour of sweet rain came down upon him. He was getting angrier. This boy, this little bastard, was avoiding him and prolonging the end of this long-standing battle. He wanted to finally rest in peace. He wanted this thorn in his side to be wrenched out and cast into the dirt, and he wanted to finally harvest those trophies he had been waiting so long for. The rain began to nourish the ground and the plants that had just been reborn into the land of Mordor, and the water began to well up in the canyons and ditches that still remained. The rain that fell gently down to the ground broke up the toxic fumes that still hung in the air and dissipated it, bringing fresh air into the barren land. Damn you, quit moving, muttered Voldemort. Then he saw it. He stopped moving himself. The ground, the cliffs, they were once dried out, scorched, or just barren. Now, it was becoming greener, filled with life. What was Potter playing at? Was Potter doing this? Those stones, they must have some sort of plant regenerative power. Well, he didn't need that stone. Potter could play with that one all he would like. The Jade Stone was all he would need. Harry stopped as well. You're finally looking around. What do you think? Great start to restoring this place. The Dark Lord glared at the boy. He wasn't taking this fight seriously. I thought we were fighting, said Voldemort. We are, said Harry. You're right where I wanted you to stop. What? Said Voldemort. The clouds overhead darkened, and a bolt of lightning came crashing down, striking the man surrounded by metal weapons. The lightning struck the weapons, and then in turn, the energy struck the Dark Lord's body. Arg! Yelled Voldemort. Metal conducts electricity. I'm glad you kept the weapons above the ground. I didn't want my grass to burn, said Harry with a smug smile. Voldemort's body fell to the ground. He was stunned. He didn't expect this. Potter didn't land a hit on him before. He didn't even try, and the first time he wanted to actually strike him, he landed a hit. Admittedly, a devastating one. You're not done yet. Don't bother playing dead, said Harry, looking down at the stunned man. Damn you, growled Voldemort. I'm going to kill you. You keep saying that, and I'm still here, said Harry with a shrug. Besides, I haven't even started to fight yet. I'm just warming up, seeing what I can do. Voldemort staggered to his feet, but noticed something out of the corner of his eye. The bubble that was protecting the others back at the border. It was still there. Could he? Voldemort moved his hand behind his thigh out of Harry's sight and flicked it. One of the smaller blades flew low across the ground until it dug deep into Harry's thigh. "Arg!" yelled Harry. He looked down and saw the dagger. Despite being firmly in the boy's leg, it continued to make its way deeper into his skin. He pulled the knife out of his thigh and forced it to rust away to dust with the opal and sapphire stone in his crown. "So, I surmised correctly, you can't make more than one of those bubbles. Least not with one that size," said Voldemort. Well, I guess I'm happy you're thinking again. You were a little mad with power cause of this stone," gasped Harry as he clutched his thigh. "I got too overconfident. He warned me about that." Harry opened his eyes and saw that he was standing in a glistening white room. Sunlight poured out of the windows, making the room hard to look at. Harry had to shield his eyes with hands. Did I die after all?" said Harry. "No, you're back home, in a way," said King Maidenbour's voice to the left of him. "What do you mean?" asked Harry, looking around, his eyes finally adjusting to the light. He was in a large room, with statues lining a large woven carpet that led to a large throne at one end of the room. "You're back in your own world, your spirit at least. But you have more pressing matters to deal with before you can even think of going home for real," said Mantenbour. "There is still the Jade Stone. The other missing stone is easy to collect. We will get that later, but the Jade Stone is the one we need to get you prepared for." "How do I prepare for it?" asked Harry. "It's simple. Sit on the throne and take the crown," said King Mantenbour. Harry looked down and away from the royal throne. He didn't want it. He hoped that there was a way to get around that. It's not just the only way you'll be able to get home, as well as Black, but if you take the throne, you'll be able to utilize the stones to their fullest extent, without the need to clasp them in your hand. You'll need that to beat that Jade Stone, said King Mendembor. "The Jade Stone is really that powerful," said Harry. "The most deadly stone there is, and in the hands of that madman, you'll need to be on your guard at all times. Keep your wits about you and try end it quickly," said King Mendembor. "Now, come with me." Harry followed the man to a large white chair that stood at the end of the room. It was the throne of the kings and queens of the wizarding world. Harry could only stare at it. He had never really heard of a king in his world before this happened. What sort of king would he be? Would people even realize he was there? Would he be worse than what Voldemort was trying to be? Or would he be remembered fondly for years to come? "Please, sit here," said King Mendembor. Harry looked at the throne. He didn't want it. He wasn't ready, but there was no choice and no time. He sat down. As he sat, the throne seemed to change with each moment, as if it were deciding what shape to take. He could feel the surface change from what felt like wood to metal to a smooth, cool stone. The armrests changed in their design, and the cushions behind him changed their density and texture. He looked up at King, who was waving his hands over Harry's head, and even brighter light blossomed between his palms. This also was changing shade and shape. "Do you vow to do what you think is best for the magical worlds?" said King Maidenbour firmly. I do," said Harry. The king lowered his hand, and the light encircled his brow. You mean that's it?" said Harry, staring at the king incredulously. "There are many, many more vows to make, but that's a general vow that takes care of them," said King Mendembor with a smile. "More than that?" asked Harry. "About 174, to be precise. But I think you'll be fine with the abridged version," said King Mendembor as he placed the crown on Harry's head. "The stones are in there. Once we get the last two, they'll go straight into the crown, no trick to it." Harry touched the crown on his head. It felt cool, and his hair still flowed in the breeze. It was like it was there, and yet wasn't. "A word of advice before we go and get the jade and tourmaline stone," said King Maidenbour. "Don't get cocky with that man. He's mad with power, so don't push him any further. He was a brilliant man, and still is. Don't let him see a weak point anywhere on you." "That's right. I was cocky. I need to end this battle quickly. I gave him too much time to look around. He's getting back his mentality in the battle. Should have taken him out when he was going nuts. Oh well, it can't be helped. I'll just have to stop playing and fight seriously." He removed his hand from his thigh, and with a flash of turquoise light, the stab wound was healed. "Guess I don't have much time then," said Harry. "I'll have to end this fairly quickly. No more messing about." "Still think you can win?" said Voldemort. "How delusional. Wait, where's the wound I gave you?" "Gone, I've healed it already," said Harry. "You won't be able to hit me that easily again. With all the running and fighting that I've done with Strider, Legolas, Gimli, and the rest of them, I'm as agile as a cat. I didn't think I could feel this strong. This place is amazing, I swear. I'll take good care of it, Mendembor. Looks like I'm going to have to start over with this place again. It can't be helped, though," said Harry, rolling his shoulders. He twitched his eye and rocks sprung from the ground. They were shaped like small daggers. There were hundreds of them, poised and ready to strike. With a nod of Harry's head, the rocks began their flight towards the man. Voldemort managed to deflect most of the stones with the help of his weapons, but the rest still whizzed past his body, giving him deep cuts that caused him to stagger. "What? What is this?" said Voldemort. "Rocks," from the ground around us. "You're lucky that I didn't use the molten lava that's still underneath, not quite cooled off," said Harry. "If it comes to that, I will use it." Voldemort stared at the young man standing before him. "No, he can't lose. He won't be defeated this easily." "You are like that. You're a sweet, naive, foolish boy," sneered Voldemort. "Give me the Jade Stone and give up," said Harry, holding out his hand. "You can't win." "And you can defeat me?" said Voldemort, still sneering. "I've shown the easiest, less complicated ways to kill you." "I think I win," said Harry. "So give up. Give me the stone, and I'll let you stay here. I'll have Gandalf or Strider keep an eye on you, but you can stay here, start a new life with your newfound youth." Voldemort sneered. "Sorry, I ate it. You won't get it without killing me." It was true. Before he had leaped down to the soldiers that were standing before the Black Gate, he had swallowed the stone, so that no matter what happened, he wouldn't be apart from it, and he wouldn't lose it on accident. He found utilizing it in this fashion was more liberating than just holding it in his hand. "So what are you going to do now?" said Voldemort, smiling venomously. Harry blinked, but then sighed. "I suppose I have no choice." In a blinding flash of light, he was gone. Voldemort laughed loudly. "I've beaten him." He turned tail and ran. "What?" Voldemort looked down and saw his feet were wrapped in tight, bright green vines that seemed to shimmer in the light. "Fool, does he think that the weapons I have can't cut these plants?" He raised his hand and brought it down, but the weapons didn't move past his ankles. "What?" said Voldemort, peering at the vines at his feet. The dust around them blew towards him, but bounced off a few inches away from his feet, as if there were, "No, there's a shield around my legs, protecting the vines, but," said Voldemort in shock. He looked behind him. "The bubble is still around the people outside the border. Damn him, he can make more than one. Where did you go? Come back, you coward." Was Potter just going to leave him there to die? Was he going to leave him to let the sun bake him and let the vultures have their despicable way with him? Potter wasn't that cruel. Perhaps he taught the boy something after all. Suddenly, he felt something creep up his throat, as if he were prepared to be ill. "Eric, what?" said Voldemort thickly, and then it came. Said Voldemort, retching loudly as bile crept up his throat. But something hard came up his throat and out his mouth as well, nearly knocking out a tooth and sending itself projecting 6 feet away. It was the Jade Stone. "What? How?" said Voldemort weakly. He reached for it, but with his legs locked in place, he couldn't reach the stone. It was too far. "No, I have to too." He felt something dig in his chest. Potter had to be behind this, but where was he? He wasn't. He began to claw furiously towards the stone. He was not going to die this way. He was Lord Voldemort. Then his eyes froze in place, his muscles tensed, and he fell limply, his feet still in the vines, holding him upright slightly. His mouth was open, bile still dripping out of his mouth. Something else began to creep up the throat of the lifeless madman, causing the skin on the Dark Lord's throat to shift. Then something began to slither out. A snake. The snake fell with a thud on the ground and curled around the Jade Stone. It was a pure white snake with a multicolored head. Its scales seemed to sparkle in the sunlight, and its eyes were like a pair of emeralds. In a flash of light, the snake turned into Harry, still in his regal robes. Harry looked at the now dead body of his most hated enemy. "If you had just given me the stone, this could have been avoided. If you just gave up, took your punishment, I guess you were beyond saving," said Harry. He turned the stone over in his hand. "Not even your Horcruxes are around anymore. Miandinbor and I took care of that back home. It's over. It's all over." Harry stood up and looked at the Jade Stone. "Do I even want you? I won't use you if at all, but you'll be in handy when we take back the weapons to their owners." The Jade Stone glowed and floated out of his hand, and secured itself safely in the crown on Harry's head. Harry's eyes flashed open. The Jade's power flowed throughout his body. "So, weapon control isn't all that you do?" said Harry with a smile. He waved his hand quickly in the empty air where Harry's had just hand-traveled. Valerian appeared. "You would have been useless in this fight, and the king's now resting in peace. You won't speak to me ever again. Sorry to say, I'll miss your voice," said Harry, running his hand over the blade. "Now, let's go return the stolen weapons, and then go home." "Remus, look," said Hagrid, staring at the bed. The bed was encased in a blinding white light. Remus and Hagrid had to shield their eyes from the aura radiating off the bed. Once the light disappeared, they lowered their hands, their faces pale with surprise. What's going on? Said Remus with a gasp. Not a clue, but... Yeah, think it's a good thing, said Hagrid. I hope so, said Remus. The people outside the Mordor border waited patiently for the battle to end. It was quiet. They didn't see anything that showed that a fierce battle was going on. Then the bubble disappeared. What happened? Said Pippin. Did Harry win? Said Frodo, looking up at Gandalf. Or did, said Sam. Then they saw the forest of swords, spears, arrows, and axes come into view around the corner. No, he lost, said Merry, tears leaking from his eyes. Without our weapons, we'll have to rely on physical attacks, said Strider. It's been a while since I've punched anyone. Gandalf, take the hobbits out of here. No, my magic can still help. My staff was not metal. It's the only weapon we have, said Gandalf. You take the hobbits. A kingdom needs you. The world needs the both of you, said a voice coming from the dust cloud. The dust settled and showed Harry, standing amongst the weaponry, uninjured, a blood stain on his pant legs, but other than that, not a scratch on him. The people who were standing there stared at the young man. Harry! Shouted the Fellowship members. They ran towards him, but none so fast as Sirius Black, who tackled him to the ground. Harry! 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 Cried Sirius. He held Harry in his arms and rocked him back and forth. Tears streamed down his face. I was so worried. You have no idea what I've been through. Don't ever do this to me again. Harry looked at his godfather fondly. I promise I won't do something like this again. Where is that king at? I'm going to rip him limb from limb, said Sirius angrily. He's already passed on, said Harry with a smile. Shit, he put some weird crap in my head. I wanted to know what he meant by it, especially the last one, said Sirius with a growl. What was that? Said Harry. Don't ask, he must have just been trying to be funny, said Sirius. Sounds like him. Took forever to get the smallest info out of him, too, said Harry with a smile. Harry, shouted the hobbits happily as they swarmed over him. Hey guys, said Harry with a bright smile as he hugged them all at once. Harry, think you can make us some food when we get back to Gondor? Said Pippin. Don't you think of anything besides your stomach, said Merry. You have no room to talk, said Harry with a smirk. I'm hungry too, said Sam. As am I, said Frodo weakly. Then I suggest, said Harry standing up out of Sirius's arms, we go to Minas Tirith and I'll cook a big meal. Hey, this'll be the first time I've cooked for you. You're in for a treat, I hope, said Harry looking down at Sirius. Harry, said Gandalf coming up to them, his eyes bright with pride. You're a king now, he bowed slightly. We must wait on you. Nonsense, I've been itching to get into a kitchen again. Besides, we got one king here already that everyone bows to. 2 would just be annoying, said Harry with a laugh. You don't need a king here anymore, you have your own. I'll repair the damage done, but really, you all can take care of yourselves. Come on, Harry, said Pippin and Merry, pulling Harry's arms. We want food. Suddenly, a whinnying sound came from the distance. It was Will-O-Wisp, galloping as fast as she could to her rider. She blew past the soldiers that stood in her way and stopped at Harry's side. How did she get out? Asked Gimli. I don't know, but if her father is indeed Shadowfax, no stable could hold her, said Legolas. Hey girl, said Harry, running his hand through her mane. Think you can give me a lift back to Minas Tirith? I want to make a big feast for everyone. She brought her head down and then brought it back up. Harry leaped on her back. He turned to the rest of them. I'll have the food all ready for you guys. Find your weapons and head on back. Harry, wait, said Sirius as Harry galloped away from them. Don't I even get 5 minutes of your time? It has been a while since he cooked. He must be very excited, and with everyone back together and you being here, he wants to make it even more spectacular, said Legolas. Let's get our weapons then, and then head off to the feast, said Gimli, handing Legolas his twin knives as he looked for his axes. Harry arrived at the gates of Minas Tirith, and with the aid of the topaz stone, he elevated the ground under Will-O-Wisp to bypass the gates and most of the tiers. The people in the city watched in wonder as the Shining Man rose into the air and landed at the top of the city. There were no guards left to stop him, but the Citadel guards... Halt, said the guards, brandishing their weapons. But when they saw the light coming off the young man's body, they faltered. I'm not here to attack anyone, said Harry, holding up a hand. I'm just here to prepare the feast for when the army comes. The army, you mean the king? It's true, we won? Said the guards. That's right, said Harry with a bright smile. You'd best spread the word. Oh, I'll need every cook, wife, and birder to help me make the feast. If you have any remaining horsemen, send the message to Rohan. They're invited as well. I'll make enough to feed everyone." "Yes, sir," said the guards, scrambling to follow the orders of the shining youth. Soon, everyone on the kingdom that had cooking skills were down in the royal kitchens. Livestock were brought to where the butchers were to be carved up, fruits and vegetables were gathered by the bushels, and chickens were plucked by older children as the younger ones were the taste testers for the sauces. The people of Gondor were happy to help in the preparations as barrels of wine, ale, and pitchers of milk were lined up for the beverages for the hungry soldiers and citizens of both kingdoms. Butchers were carving up the meat with ferocious speed so that they could be cooked the moment that the army and people of Rohan arrived. Berder himself was baking mountains of bread. He was overjoyed at the return of his young friend that he rolled up his sleeve and put all of his talent to the test, out-baking the younger bakers. Harry was filleting several fish and putting them large pans, pouring creamy sauces and herbs over top of them. The smells from the kitchens wafted down the tiers. If anyone wasn't helping, they were almost salivating at the smell of the cookings going on up on the topmost tier. It wasn't long till the people of Rohan, who were already on their way to Gondor, and the army was making their way to Gondor. Anya was riding in the lead on Voldemort's old horse, who seemed taken with her. He would allow no one but Anya to get close to him, and she doted on him while she was in the horse country. They knew to come to Gondor due to a vision that Anya had. She saw a great celebration, and saw that the flags of Rohan flying over the people alongside the Gondor flag. It took some convincing, but the remaining soldiers of Rohan escorted the people to Gondor. When she saw the small hobbits and Strider, she galloped on ahead of the escort and towards them. "Lady Anya!" shouted the men who were ordered to protect her. "Anya," said Merry. "Wow, she is here," said Pippin. "I'm glad that you all are safe." "I saw," said Anya. Then a twinkling stone came from her pocket, the tourmaline stone. It had traveled from dress to dress that Anya had worn, as if some invisible hand had made sure that she kept it on her at all times. Anya stared at the light. "What is that?" asked Anya. "That would be another stone of Harry's. It seems you had it," said Gandalf with a smile. "Harry's safe," said Anya quickly. "Is this her?" asked Sirius, nudging Strider. "It is," said Strider with a smile. "I can see how it can be difficult," said Sirius with a roguish smile. "He's making the feast. I can smell it from here," said Sam with a smile as he closed his eyes. "I can't wait to see him. But what of—" said Anya. "Harry defeated him," said Strider. "Thank the gods," said Anya, her eyes brimming with joy. Ymir looked at Anya's joyful smile and glared at the top of the tier, jealousy ripping through his body. The party that waited for the people of Rohan and the army was immense. The food that poured from the royal kitchens trailed down to the third highest tier came in all varieties. Every table that was available, every plate, bowl, goblet was put out at the street. Every inch of the tables were covered with either food or drink to tempt the people in the area. People danced, sang, and ate for joy. Finally, the siege was over. The battle was over. The war was over. The men were returning home to their families, and life could return to a peace that they all had almost forgotten. The army came back home to their families, and the people waved and cheered to Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and the 4 hobbits. "Wonder where the lad is," said Gimli. "If you're looking for King Fanasinki, he is up on the top level," said a young woman, placing a bowl down on the table. "King Fanasinqui. He asked to be called that?" asked Gandalf. "No, sir, but," said woman, said with a blush. "What does that even mean?" asked Sirius. "I like Harry better." "Jewels of Light is the simple translation," said Gandalf with a smile. "A proper name. Yeah, but Harry's shorter. Well, then what are we waiting for? Let's get to the top," said Sirius from his own horse. They galloped up the city to the topmost tier, leaving the armies and people of Rohan at a spot on the tables where there was particularly tasty dish. They had gone on, waving to people that waved at them, and finally stopping at the top tier. On the large stone pathway that jutted out from the city, a giant bowl carved out of mountainside was sitting over a giant fire. There was the young man they were looking for, in front of the fire. To be precise, he was expelling the fire from his mouth, as if he were a dragon. The rich scent of the stew caused Sirius's sharp nose to almost imagine him eating the smell. It was a meal fit for a king, and there was a king making it. That thought brought him to a halt. He could hardly believe it. His little boy was a king now. After what seemed to be a comatose state Harry had been in, he was crowned king and was now in charge of the entire wizarding world. He had to talk to Harry, make sure that that Harry wasn't going to leave him behind. Sirius made to move forward, but one of the Citadel guards caught him. "Don't get any closer. The fire is too intense for anyone else to get near it," said the guard. Harry stopped breathing out the fire and stood up. He waved his hand and the giant stone spoon began to stir the contents. With his other hand, he controlled the knives around him to chop multiple vegetables, and with the help of a small tornado, they were picked up into the sky, dropped into the large pot of stew. Not surprising that he would use endless power to cook a meal, said Gandalf, shaking his head. Harry touched the bottom of the giant stone bowl, and amazingly, a small hole opened in the bottom, big enough to allow some stew with all its ingredients drop into a large pot. He touched the bowl again, causing it to close seamlessly. Here's another pot, ready to be taken to a table. Oh, hey, said Harry with a smile. Harry, that smells really good, said Sirius with a smile. Your guys' food is up at the table. Get up there and tuck in. And what? Said Legolas. You're speaking your world's tongue again, Harry. Go to the table and start eating, said Harry with a smile. There are some people waiting for you. They turned towards the table that stood before the doors to where the throne of Gondor was. At the table was Elrond, Arwen, Haldir, Galadriel, Celeborn, and Glorfindel. While Aragorn and Arwen embraced tenderly, Anya sat beside the hobbits, and Eomer took the seat directly beside her. Lady Anya, said Eomer with a mellow voice. Anya blushed faintly. Harry noticed out of the corner of his eye at the two of them a sharp pang went through his heart, but he smiled. He did tell her to find someone else, but it was a bit hard to watch her do it right in front of him. He was a good man, though. She could do far worse. Merry and Pippin looked disappointed as they looked between Anya and Harry. Darn, you two really are spending too much with Harry. You're speaking his language like a bunch of copycats, said Sam with a smile. You have no room to talk, Sam, said Frodo with a smile. Copycats? They waited until Harry was done serving the stew to eat, waiting for the man to join them for the feast. How come you didn't eat anything yet? Said Harry. We were waiting for you, dear child, or should I say, your majesty, said Celeborn with a smile. Harry turned a faint pink. Haven't done anything wriggle yet, that's going to have to wait a bit, said Harry, taking a seat across from all of them. Sirius picked up his chair and moved it beside Harry. What will be your first act? Asked Glorfindel. Well, not sure, yes. Guess I'll go home, said Harry. Sirius smiled brightly. But I'll be back the moment I let everyone know I'm fine. If Sirius was like this, I can only imagine what the others were like, said Harry. Hey, I was worried the most, said Sirius with a frown. There is still some stuff I have to do here, fix the messes that Sauron and Saruman caused, and then, I don't know, I haven't decided, said Harry. Decided what, lad? Said Elrond. The way that Miendembor made it here was a curtain in one of the rooms of his castle, and I haven't decided if I should destroy that or not, said Harry. The people on the other end of the table gasped. But why? Said Sam. This world, it might have been spared the first battle that raged here over the ring if the king had not had such tempting powers. I don't know, our world's magic might be too dangerous for this place. You don't need us. But we do, Harry, said Aragorn. True, we can handle ourselves in the most dire of circumstances, but without you, this journey could have ended far worse. That's right. Without you coming to get us, we would have died on Mount Doom, said Sam. I think Gandalf would have done something to help you without my coming to get you, said Harry. But we'll never know that. Also, that extra pack you gave us, it kept us going even longer than what ours did, said Frodo. You saved many people back in Helm's Deep, ending a battle that would have claimed many lives, said Eowyn. You were more than needed here, said Elrond. The trials we all suffered would have been more terrible, and hundreds of lives could have paid the price, and if you do close off the way between our worlds, we will sorely miss you. Don't go, Harry, said the hobbits. Pippin wiped the tears from his eyes. If I may offer a suggestion, said Gandalf with a smile, perhaps you could ensure to future kings what has happened to you and King Miendembor, and offer them the choice to come here. Harry looked at Gandalf. For I have no doubt that your successor will share the same qualities you possess, said Gandalf. Harry looked down, his mouth twitching in a smile. As long as it's just a visit, muttered Sirius as he put spoonfuls of stew in his mouth. Are you that afraid that he'd prefer to stay here? Said Aragorn with a smirk. He already mentioned coming home. I think I win this little war, said Sirius, sneering back. Harry looked between Sirius and Strider. Wow, what did I miss? You don't want to know, said Legolas and Gimli together. Well, I guess, said Harry, picking at his stew, a smile on his face. I'll keep the way open, and I'll see if the next king is ready to help keep it the way it is, and I'll come back to visit. So you aren't staying? Said Eomer with a smile. Anya looked over to Harry, tears in her eyes. Harry stood up, walked over to where she sat, and knelt down in front of her, his chin on his hands. I'd be staying in my world, and that world's a bit too tainted to have you in it. You'd most likely get sick with all the poisonous smog in the air, and its rivers and food isn't half as clean and pure as this place is. It's best that you stay here, said Harry, with a saddened look in his eyes. Besides, I think I can count on him to make you happy if he can. He nodded over to Eomer. Eomer stared at Harry. He was prepared to challenge him for the courting rights to Anya. But he was backing down. The man that destroyed the Uruk-hai army was backing down. Said Anya, if I took you home, I'd only be breaking both our hearts. You'd miss this place. And I'd watch you get sick from so much as stepping foot outside the door, said Harry. He's got a point. London at the very least is known for its smog. This place is a veritable heaven compared to our world, said Sirius. Then why go back? Asked Mary through a mouth of carrots. Home is home, said Sirius, and I'm missing my wand. Can't wait till I can do things so much easier. First thing I'm going to do is take a bath. Good idea, said Harry with a smile. Stuff it, said Sirius, giving Harry a shove. Remember, he's the king of your world now, said Galadriel with a fond smile. He wouldn't do anything with me, said Sirius with a smile. Don't count on it, said Harry with a smile. Hey now, said Sirius. Several of the people laughed. Now, about this new name of yours, said Legolas with a smile. What new name? Asked Harry. A few people have been calling you Feynisinki. King Feynisinki, said Strider. What does that name mean? Said Harry with wide eyes. Jewels of Light, said Sirius. Makes sense, I suppose, said Harry, touching his crown gently. The jewels glistened and sparkled brightly in the crown upon his head. So, you found all the stones, Harry. A staggering feat, said Elrond. Yeah, but I haven't used them all either. I haven't used this and this one yet, said Harry, pointing to the barrel and the tourmaline. One of them just showed up out of nowhere. How did you take down that crazy guy? Asked Mary. That? Who? Asked Arwen. He ambushed us, right outside of Mordor, said Pippin. I still can't believe he's gone. Are you sure he's dead? Said Sirius. If he can survive an adder bite to the heart, he's earned immortality, said Harry. Hey, what? Said Sirius in shock. I turned into a small insect, flew down his throat, grabbed the jade stone that he swallowed, turned into an ant, carried it out, burrowed my way to his heart, and then turned into an adder, and I bit it, said Harry. The table was silent. I wanted to use all the stones to see what they could do, but I was getting too cocky, said Harry. What's cocky? Asked Legolas. It's what Sirius and Strider kept acting like around each other, said Harry. Sirius and Aragorn smiled. Wait, said Sirius, the smile coming off his face. Did you get injured? He stabbed me, yeah, but I healed right away. The fight didn't last long. I didn't want to drag it out when I didn't have to, said Harry. I'm still getting used to the power, and it's a real strain on my body. Using the stones for normal kitchen duties is a lot easier to get used to the power than by using them in battle. So you won without really any trouble, said Sirius. Oh, there was trouble, but it didn't happen here, said Harry. And I can't say it was trouble, more like awful. What? Said Gimli. Before we head back, we have something to do first, said Maidenboar. What's that? Asked Harry. Remember that Horcrux I took out of you, said King Maidenboar. Yes, said Harry. I can sense others, made by that man, said King Maidenboar. Others? Said Harry in shock. About 5 more, I shouldn't wonder, said King Mendebor. How are we to find them? Asked Harry. They could be anywhere, right? Well, it would normally take a long, hard process to find them, but you're the king now. Hard work is now not a required part of life. I still have some residue left from the Horcrux that attached itself to your body. Take it in your hand. Harry held out his hand, and the king placed a smoky orb in his hand. Its wispy fog condensed and dispersed repeatedly. Now what? Look at it, said King Mienbear. Harry looked at the orb. That would have drained your life. It would have caused him to peer into your mind, possess you, until it would have been possible for him to kill your closest friends through you, said King Mienbear. Harry's eyes flashed. Tears of anger sparkled in his eyes, and his teeth were bared. Damn him, snarled Harry. Now, look out that window, now, just. He stopped. The glare in Harry's eyes were so intense that even in his spectral form, a shiver went up and down his spine. You're done, he said with a voice as cold as poisoned steel. The aura in his hand disappeared with a small flash. The king stared at the young man's hand in amazement, but he smiled. And that's that. A long, painful quest, done in a matter of seconds with a royal command. You mean to tell me that I can end someone's life with a command? Said Harry, despite the still furious look. There was a flicker of worry. Oh no, you were only able to do that because it was a form of magic. You can control what magic is active and what is not. You could cease the world's magic with the blink of an eye if you desired, said King Meandle. So, he's really gone? Said Harry. He will, once you defeat him, said Meadenboar. If you don't, well, he might have enough foolishness to remake his Horcruxes, but I'd bet on you to defeat him. No chance of him winning, so long as you take him seriously from the get-go. Harry still looked down, not something I'm comfortable talking about. Let's just say, I didn't think he could sink so low. And this is Voldemort. How low did you think he could get? Said Sirius, shaking his head, though he didn't know what Harry was talking about. So the fight, it went somewhat smoothly, said Legolas. As well as anything, said Harry with a smile, though he sighed. Sort of anticlimactic with all the grief he's given me. That's a good thing, said Sirius quickly. If only he didn't swallow that stupid stone, the fight would have gone on longer, said Harry. You wanted to fight? Said Sam in shock. I wanted to find out why. I wanted to know so many things, but I figured that since I was in there, I'd finish it, said Harry. Odd discussion for diner, said Glorfindel. But quite exciting, said Celeborn with a smile to his old friend. So, are you going to go to the Grey Heavens? Said Harry. We may be recalling our kin from the Grey Heavens, we are unsure even now, said Galadriel. The Golden Wood is still weakening. Harry looked down to her and then looked down at his plate. Do you want it renewed? Said Harry softly. Galadriel and Celeborn looked at Harry in shock. That would be incredible, said Celeborn with a gasp. If you want to stay in Middle-earth, I can restore the Golden Wood, as well as Fangorn and many other forests in Middle-earth, said Harry, still looking down at his half-eaten bowl. Please, said Arwen, looking at her father, who nodded. Harry stood up slowly and walked all the way down the long outreach of Minas Tirith. They all stood up and watched him, his robe fluttering in the breeze. He had a focused look in his eye and continued walking towards the very end of the outreach. What's he going to do? Asked Sam, moving forward. The other hobbits followed. When he reached the very end of the outreach, he held out both hands and tilted his head up. Suddenly the wind picked up, blowing fiercely towards the west. On the wind they could see millions upon millions of tiny sparkles flashing in the sun, as if they were tiny glittering snowflakes, blinking in the sunlight. They moved out onto the Pelennor fields and beyond. He then turned back towards them. That should do it. What was it? Asked Frodo as they hurried up to him. I just sent a special bit of pollen off to where the forests were. That should revitalize anything it touches, and there's more than enough to restore 100 forests, said Harry. The hobbits looked up at Harry with awe in their eyes. Now, Frodo, he said, kneeling down to his level. He could hardly believe how much taller he got since he last met the hobbit. There was something haunting about Frodo, something that wasn't sitting right. There's something beside your hand that's hurting. Frodo blinked. Yes, but I don't think even Elrond can help. Who said anything about Elrond? Said Harry, placing a hand on Frodo's head. Frodo gasped. A warm, tingling feeling blossomed from the top of his head down to his furry toes. His shoulder, his back, his hand, they all began to grow warm. I can't regrow bones, but I should be able to smooth over that gaping wound, said Harry softly. Frodo looked at his hand, and new smooth skin stretched over the wound, as if it had been years that Gollum chomped his finger off. This is the first time I've been able to touch you, said Harry with a smile. Frodo's eyes began to well with tears. He rubbed his eyes as Harry removed his hand. Glorfindel, Haldir, and Celeborn saw how vibrant he looked. His stamina for healing must have increased. Remember, lad, you'll have to go back to Rivendell, said Elrond. Actually, I already did. King Meadenboar and I collected his body and brought it back to Castle Valor, said Harry. When did that all happen? Asked Pippin. While the tower was falling, said Harry. But there was no time, said Merry. There was plenty of time with the opal and onyx stone. Why does it always have to be the first thing one finds that helps you in the long run? It's like that movie with the Emerald City and the flying monkeys. What? Said the hobbits. Never mind, said Harry. You done eating, Sirius? Said Harry. Hun. Yeah, said Sirius. Will-o-wisp, called Harry. She came trotting over from where a large bale of hay stood in the corner of the square and came up to him, her magnificent head resting in his hand. I asked if I could take you with me, and Meadenboar said yes. Would you like to go with me? Said Harry. Will-o-wisp whinnied and nuzzled Harry's hand. I promise I'll take good care of you, said Harry with a smile. You'll take the horse, but not the girl. You really have no priorities, said Sirius, shaking his head. She wasn't eating much while Harry was in Sauron's clutches. She would barely allow anyone else to ride her for long. Taking Anya to your world could spell her death, but leaving Will-O-Wisp could mean hers, said Gandalf with a smile. Eomer looked down at Anya, who looked up at him. Please be my queen, said Eomer, bowing low. Anya looked up at him, then looked at Harry. Harry smiled and nodded. Remember, I wanted you to be happy. You wouldn't be happy with me, but Eomer is a great guy, good man. He's a better match for you. But I'm not the same status, said Anya. I'm a barmaid from Bree. I could care less, said Eomer quickly. Anya looked up at Eomer. Harry caught Sirius's eye and flicked his head to instruct him to come towards him. Sirius walked over to Harry and stood beside him. Harry flicked his finger towards Anya, and instantly an image came to her mind. She was sitting in large throne, with Eomer on her right. They were smiling down at the people standing in front of them. People were happy, dancing and singing, and children were running around the large hall. 3 children, with bright blonde hair like shining gold, were chasing around a large dog, leaping on its back and riding it like a pony. They had Anya's eyes. In an instant, the vision was gone. Anya gasped and looked towards Harry. His body was wavy and was surrounded in shining light. Goodbye, I hope to see you all again soon.